Hello, everybody. How are you guys doing? Please make sure that you've liked the live stream, that you've pressed the thumbs up button, and please let me know in the comments where you are tuning in from, what state, what town, what galaxy, etc., etc. And I was going to start with something else, but while I was waiting to begin and getting all my documents ready, I found out through the comments that Daniel Ellsberg has passed away. So I'll be speaking a little bit about him in a second. We've got people tuning in from Palestine, from Virginia, from Monterey, from Serbia, from New York, from California, from Germany, St. Petersburg, New York, California, Florida, New Zealand. There we go. It's going a little too fast for me to read now. Northern California, Delaware, Faroe Islands, California, Florida, Turkey, Las Vegas. Very good, very good. And Dublin as well. And Scotland and Norway. So let's talk a little bit about Mr. Ellsberg, right? He's very important. And give me a second to just set this up. I wasn't planning to, I literally just found out from you guys while I was waiting. So 1 second. Okay. So Daniel Ellsberg, the Pentagon Papers whistleblower, has just passed away. I'm saddened to learn. He was 92 years old, and he discovered a few months ago that he had pancreatic cancer, and it was inoperable. And his family have just confirmed that he died without pain and surrounded by love and etc. So that's good to know. And I mean. Yeah, I'm very sad that he passed away because he's such a pivotal figure in politics and history, and I kind of wanted to go through some of the things that he did, because he was basically an analyst working for the Rand Corporation, for the Pentagon, right, and through the Rand Corporation, and he was sent to Vietnam to gather data about the war and about guerrilla tactics, and he came to the conclusion that this war is unwinnable, and I think pretty much everybody understood that. But the American public were being told one thing, or the world rather is being told one thing, and of course inside the United States, from where from Washington, from where this war was being waged, there's lots of lies and deceit, and I mean you had in the end, 58,000 American soldiers killed, I think 300,000 wounded. And then even worse, you have about 1 million fighters, so Viet Cong from the north killed. I think 2 million from the south killed, right, from South Vietnam. And also the civilians, paying the worst price in not just Vietnam, but in Cambodia and in Laos. And Daniel Ellsberg, his only regret, and he said this many times publicly, his only regret is that he did not leak these papers sooner, because then people would have found out what was happening in Vietnam, right? What the Nixon administration was trying to hide. And I just wanted to read through his witness testimony, not during his own trial, because his own trial, by the way, this went to the Supreme Court, right? And there's this whole issue about freedom of speech, because they wanted to publish what he had found, right? What he had leaked, and the Nixon administration was trying to say that, well, no, you can't do that because it would damage national security. How many times have we heard this phrase, right? So they ruled in the paper's favor, and they were allowed to publish, and they still tried to lock him up on espionage charges, right, using the Espionage Act of 1917. Now, the thing is that this case was thrown out in the end because the government tried to break into his psychiatrist's office. Okay, so again, just to be clear, this is the government breaking into Daniel Ellsberg's records at his psychiatrist's office, and they were caught. So the whole thing was thrown out, and he made some very important revelations about how he was treated, right? Because this factors in a lot to the Assange case, right? So I covered the Assange case, and when during these 4 weeks, every single day you had somebody else giving testimony, and Daniel Ellsberg was one of those people. So he came to Assange's defense, and he made it very clear that he supports what WikiLeaks has done. He viewed it just as important as his own disclosures. Okay, so he said that if what I did with Vietnam was important, well, what Assange and WikiLeaks did with Iraq and Afghanistan is just as important. Right, and he obviously argued and advocated for Assange to be released, right? And he gave some insight as to how Assange would be treated were he to be extradited to the United States, especially given that Assange is being charged with the same Espionage Act. Okay, so here's I pulled up his testimony. This is I actually the day when he gave his testimony, I covered the whole trial here on the channel, and he saw my video, Daniel Ellsberg, and he I think he shared it and gave it a nod. So I take great pride in that. Here I'm going to pull up the written testimony. This is thanks to Tarek Haddad. So he has a great archive on his website. Really exhaustive. So let me just show you what Daniel Ellsberg said. Okay, so he's trying to give you some background information, right? He was taking papers from his safe at the Rand Corporation, one page at a time, collated the documents as they came off the Xerox machine, and he said he cut off the top secret classifications from the top and the bottom of all the pages. He says, quote, "I knew then that my actions could result in my going to prison, but I believe that the public had to know about this." He also says, "I considered my actions then and now to be essential in the actions of a patriot. Without publication in the press, it would have proved impossible for the content of the Pentagon Papers to be placed in the public domain. I spent over a year and a half attempting to get hearings in Congress without success." And then here he says that he had possession in his safe in the Pentagon, quote, "documents which gave lie to claims of an unequivocal, unprovocated attack on U.S. destroyers in the Tonkin Gulf. False claims about the incidents in the Gulf of Tonkin led to the passage of the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution by Congress, which gave President Johnson legal justification for engaging in war against North Vietnam. I was later told by Senator Morse, one of the two senators who had voted against it, that if I had given him that evidence at the time, instead of waiting until 1969, when I provided it to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, the resolution would have been voted down. I have long regretted not releasing the documents in 1964 or in the next few months, and it is a heavy burden for me to bear." Right? So that's very important because as he mentions the Gulf of Tonkin incident, right? This was just a lie that oh my God, the Americans were just randomly attacked, and going into Vietnam is nothing but self-defense. Is a total lie. I mean, come on, this is long been debunked, right? And there was no unprovocated attack of U.S. destroyers, right? And he disclosed this, and of course, bear this in mind every time you hear about, the United States has to go to this country, to Afghanistan, to Iraq, and to et cetera, et cetera. It's always self-defense, right? Bear that in mind. It's very important to keep in mind. So he goes down here and he says that he has studied Julian Assange's situation and the subject matter of the WikiLeaks publications in 2010 and 2011 concerning the conduct conduct of the Afghan and Iraq wars and detentions in Guantanamo Bay, and U.S. diplomatic cables commenting upon aspects of U.S. actions. Quote, I've observed the extraordinary breadth and depth of these revelations, revealing as they do the reality of the consequences of war. The exposure of such would be imperative to bring about any alteration of U.S. government policy. I have followed closely the impact of a number of those publications and consider them to be amongst the most important truthful revelations of hidden criminal state behavior that have been made public in U.S. history. My own actions in relation to the Pentagon Papers and the consequences of their publication have been acknowledged to have performed such a radical change of understanding. I view the WikiLeaks publications of 2010 and 2011 to be of comparable importance. Okay, so that's exactly what he said. He views Assange's work to be of comparable importance. This is very, very, very vital to understand because you know, the Espionage Act is a political tool. That's why they used it against him. Used it against Snowden. Used it against Julian Assange, Chelsea Manning, and it's always the same court, by the way, right? It's they call it Espionage Court because all of the indictments are issued out of this Eastern District Court for the Eastern District in Virginia. It's a you know. Something important that he revealed is that you're not allowed a public interest defense. Okay, so when he was you know, taken to court, they told him that it doesn't matter that you think you released these documents for the good of the American people, or more importantly, for the good of people in Vietnam who are, you know, who are who are facing the brunt of this U.S. foreign policy, who are really on the receiving end and paying the ultimate price for what the United States is doing in Vietnam, right? They don't care. There is no public interest defense. You could say that, you know, Daniel Ellsberg or Julian Assange, for that matter, it doesn't, either one, because they're being hit with the same law. They could have saved the entire human race and the planet from an alien attack, whatever you want to say, and it would not matter. You're not allowed to say it in court. Nothing good that you did by leaking these documents is admissible in court. Goodbye. I mean, how do you talk about a democracy and about you know, truth and a free press and all these things and have this as a law? It makes no sense. It makes no sense, right? There's no room for whistleblowing or you know, exposing criminal state behavior, right? Or state criminal behavior, rather. Yeah, there's no room for it. So, you know, it's not anymore about, oh, look at what the state is doing. Look at how these people are killing millions in Vietnam. That's not the crime anymore. The crime is that you told people that we are killing millions of people in Vietnam. This is madness, right? Same thing with Assange, if you want, right? Same thing. It's the same principle. So now, telling the public, telling the world about the crimes becomes the crime. I mean, there's no logic, there's no moral, you know, morality, there's nothing here. And so, you know, you cannot reconcile having a democracy or a so-called democracy with laws like this. You cannot reconcile the two. And so that's why I think it's very important to point out always, look how many people came and testified on Assange's behalf. Look, you know, Noam Chomsky, you got all these, forget the doctors who are saying that he's too sick to be extradited. Forget the people that are telling you how bad the U.S. prison system is, that he's going to be put in like a hellhole, you know, in Colorado. Just the stature, right, of not the man, but the acts. And you have people like this coming and testifying and advocating for his actions and telling the judge, look how important this is. Look how vital it is. It changes public understanding and it needs to be in the public domain. These are things that have to be heard. And right now, right as I'm speaking to you, you're going to have tons of websites, almost every news website in the world, putting out an article to talk about Daniel Ellsberg and say that he's passed away at the age of 92, which is great. And it's, you know, people give him credit for being a whistleblower. They say it was the right thing to do. You showed how they were killing all these millions. Well, don't wait for it to be so late. You don't have to wait you know, so long. And and Daniel Ellsberg, you know, in his case, no one waited until now to recognize the value of his acts. But my point is that I don't think they're going to tell you that he stood up for Assange. Maybe Snowden, they might mention in a few articles, but they have to tell you, because if he's a good man and what he did is good, then listen to who else he calls good, and who, you know, what other acts he describes as being valorous and being vital for the public, for people to know. Listen to what he has to say then. You know, remember that as well. And you don't have to wait so long. History does, you know, the public, you don't have to wait so long to recognize the acts of someone, you know. And in the case of Assange, you don't have to wait 10, 20 years, 30 years to recognize the value of what he's done, right? That's all I wanted to say. So rest in peace. So I see we've got about 400 people watching. Please make sure you've hit the like button. That's the thumbs up button. It helps the channel. And I'm going to keep going with these topics that we have here, man. I've lined up like a million things that I wanted to show you, like actually a million things. So it's a bit difficult now. Here, let me show you this. Okay, let's talk about this Ukrainian counteroffensive. All right, let's talk about that, because it's still ongoing. I mean, and I commented on it the other day, but there's some more things we need to talk about. We need to discuss. Okay, give me a sec. Okay. So let me show you how well Ukraine's counteroffensive is proceeding. You know, that's kind of that's the gist of it, right? You've got smoking German and American tanks, you know, up in smoke. You can see there's a Leopard here, where my mouse is, where my cursor is, and next to it are a couple of Bradleys, which are American armored vehicles. That's about, you know, that's about the gist of it. And so this is the much hyped Ukrainian counteroffensive, which you know, they've been trying to sell to you in the media for months, and even now, as it's going up in smoke, and Russia's defensive positions are working, they're still trying to convince you, no, Ukraine's definitely going to win. It's just going to take time, and we promise you, the Russian soldiers, they're about to collapse, you know, like they have no morale. Ukraine has the morale, right? Ukraine, they have high spirits. Ukraine have Western equipment, right? Russians don't know how to build tanks, right? It's not like they caused 80% of German casualties in World War II. Oh no, it's not like the T-34 crushed the Germans on the Eastern Front. The Russians are idiots. No, these Western tanks are much better. We promise you. Really? Let's go through this, guys. All right, let's go through this. So, you know, just to give you an idea how crazy this is, the Russians are taking some of these vehicles with such speed, in such a, you know, in one fell swoop, that oftentimes they're finding the engine is still on, like the vehicle is still on. Okay, look at this video. They barely, you know, taking the crew. The goddamn thing is still on.
О, что там, Роман? О, ты граник. РПГ-22, да? О. А вот он, фрисовский нахваленный леопард. О, их две техники работают. Это Брэдли. Ну вот. Не так уж и страшна эта техника. Вот так вот.
Look at them. They're all piled up. They're piled up. It's like some boy playing with his toy tanks. You just throw them into one. I mean, it's crazy. I'm you know, obviously these are anecdotal, but when you've got video after video popping up of these you know, armored vehicles being crushed like this. I mean, just take a look. This video is like 10 minutes of armored vehicles being hit. It's one after the next, right? Some of them with mines, some of them with drones. In this case, you can see that, right? The videos really speak for themselves. Right there, you've got this guy down here running away. And keep in mind, this is not a tank. This is a howitzer. It's an artillery cannon. You know, he knows what's coming. He's running away. And I don't blame him one bit. That's what you should do. It's one video after the next. I mean, I really... You get the idea. Now the question is, why is this happening? Why are the Ukrainians and their much hyped counteroffensive? You know, why is there not why is it not working out? Well, look, I explained perhaps once, you know, how these Russian defensive lines work, and it's not particular to the Russians, right? But this is how they do it. What they'll have first is they'll have what you call dragon's teeth. So these are kind of they look like concrete pyramids that they drop into the ground. Actually, they'll put them on the ground, but if you have time and you're able to actually dig them into the ground slightly, even better. They will hold even better. The whole point about, you know, this is that you're going to block mechanized infantry. So basically, troops that have armored vehicle support or just armored vehicles, period. So tanks and APCs. APC stands for Armored Personnel Carrier. You know, sometimes they have turrets and guns. You'll have a cannon on top and perhaps a machine gun. You know, 7.62 millimeter next to the driver's seat or on the sides. But you know, they are mainly, as the name implies, they're mostly made for carrying troops, right? Could be 5, could be 10, doesn't matter. But at the end of the day, these are armored vehicles. The whole point of the dragon's teeth is to stop them dead in their tracks, no pun intended. Now, if they're somehow able to get past the dragon's teeth, past these concrete pyramids, what the Russians have done is they've dug these anti-tank ditches, right? Or I mean, you know, it's really like a grave, like literally, you know, because tanks can drive over small gaps, you know, up to a certain extent. But when you dig these so wide, the tank is just literally going to fall in and there's no getting out. It's that simple. It sounds so rudimentary, but that's what's going on, right? So just so you can see here on the map, these are a couple of examples of multiple lines of defense, right? And so after the dragon's teeth and after the anti-tank ditches, you'll have trenches, right? So when I say trenches, I mean like, you know, World War I trenches, but actually a bit with a few improvements. Instead of digging them in straight lines, because if somebody jumps down into your trench and they can see all the way through, I mean, it's pointless, right? Because you can take the whole thing in a much shorter time. These trenches are zigzagged, right? It provides better cover for the troops that are fighting from these positions, and in the case that, you know, in the event that the enemy are able to get in, it's going to be much harder for them to take. They can't see what's, you know, maybe a few meters ahead. Okay, so that's when you see all these zigzags, that's what's going on here. Yeah, right. So this will be a trench system over here. And of course the tree lines, right? Don't forget about the tree lines. Trees provide a natural cover and camouflage for them to put the armored vehicles or artillery inside of, right? So these are things that will maybe be a second, third, or fourth line of defense. There's no you know, absolute order for these things. It depends where you are and what you're trying to do and defend from, right? So actually, they did a really good job here of explaining them. I walked you guys through this last time, but look at these illustrations. They're so simple. If you dig this, man, there's no coming out of there, right? This is an APC, Armored Personnel Carrier. right? So these anti-tank ditches, it's game over. Here are these dragon's teeth, right? The concrete pyramids. And you might, if you've watched some World War II movies, you might be more familiar with the hedgehog barriers. But they kind of, they kind of accomplish the same thing, right? At the end of the day, they serve the same purpose. And something that I expected the Ukrainians to know their own weather, and certainly the Russians as well. Starting from March, you have what is known as mud season in Ukraine. Okay, so you end up with tanks with armored vehicles that are literally stuck in the mud, and these things, they have so much horsepower, but there's no getting them out. So sometimes you find tanks that are just abandoned like this. Okay, so all of these things need to be taken into consideration. And even after the obstacles that we discussed, there are mines, right? So these entire areas will have mines in front and behind, right? So obviously the troops planting, or the Russians in this case, planting the mines, they know what to avoid and what not to avoid, what they can actually use. But in a lot of cases, you're going to have mines seeped into the soil. So you have these Ukrainian, well, I should say Western tanks given to Ukraine, trying to plow through the Russian defenses. They're getting bogged down in the mud. They're getting hit by mines. And then as soon as they're detected, the Russians are sending in drones. And so you end up with a carnage, with a massacre like this image here. That's what you end up with. They don't stand a chance. It's really sad, honestly. You got a bunch of young men killing other young men for what? You could have, in a matter of days, diplomats sitting down, presidents sitting down and hashing this thing out. What's the point of all this? It's so unnecessary. But there you go. This is happening nonetheless. And I want to show you the difference in composure and in confidence. Okay, so take a look at Putin talking about this Ukrainian counteroffensive, and then I'll show you Zelensky, of course, right?
Потеряли свыше 160 танков и свыше 360 бронемашин разного типа. Это только то, что мы видим. Есть еще потери, которых мы не видим, которые наносятся высокоточным оружием большой дальности по скоплениям личного состава и техники. Так что на самом деле их больше, этих потерь со стороны Украины. И вот по моим подсчетам это примерно 25, а может быть 30% от объема той техники, которая была поставлена из-за рубежа. Вот примерно. Мне кажется, что если они объективно посчитают, они с этим согласятся. Но, насколько я видел из открытых источников, западных источников, примерно так они, мне кажется, и говорят. Вот. Так что наступление идет, и вот результаты на сегодняшний день такие, о которых я сейчас сказал. Да, но наши потери по остальным показателям, по личному составу, пускай Минобороны говорит, а здесь, вот я сказал, танков у них свыше 160, у нас 54. Часть из них подлежит восстановлению и ремонту.
Obviously, take everything he said with a pinch of salt, because, the Russians are going to amplify their gains and minimize their losses, and the Ukrainians will do exactly the same thing. So if he said 54, you could count maybe 70. Okay, we're just kind of speculating here, but you need to understand that at the end of the day, he's a politician. Zelensky's also a politician. Obviously, I expect a bit more lying from NATO, just because of the precedent. But that's how it is. Let me show you Zelensky. Okay, here's what Zelensky was saying.
Mr. President, it's very good to see you again. We are now in the early days of this long-anticipated counteroffensive. How's it going? What's the goal? How would you describe progress so far?
I cannot give you all the details. There are both defensive and offensive actions. Things look not bad. I would say it's generally positive, but it's difficult. Our heroic people, our troops, who are now at the front of the front line, are facing very tough resistance. And you understand why. Because for Russia to lose this campaign to Ukraine, I would say, actually means losing the war.
Mr. President is very good.
Right, so he sounds a little bit like Blinken. So here you can see now the mainstream media trying to do damage control. Here, this is from Reuters. They said that Ukraine struck in 2 areas along the southeastern front last week as it began the main phase of its long-awaited operation, reporting 7 retaken villages, but also taking losses, including Western infantry fighting vehicles and tanks. 7 villages? What do you mean 7 villages? Oh my God. Man, you need to be retaking cities, entire provinces. What do you mean 7 villages? I can't believe they actually got this past the editor. Like, are we allowed to report that Ukraine is losing and really, really doing badly? Apparently, yeah, they were allowed to say it. You know, they also kind of obfuscated here with saying, you know, losses including Western infantry fighting vehicles and tanks. I mean, losses is putting it mildly. This is a massacre. You know, this is really, really, really bad. And again, you know, these are unnecessary deaths. This whole thing, this whole war in Ukraine could have been, there were like literally decades to avoid this. They didn't care. They just used Ukraine as a battering ram against the Russians. It's a salami tactic, man. It's nothing. You know, it's nothing complicated about it. This is The Guardian. They said that it's clear that this operation will take a while. What do you mean take a while? I thought if we give the Ukrainians our tanks, our far superior tanks that are greatly, that are way better than the Russian junk, that Ukraine, just like that's all they need is our tanks, and then they're going to defeat the Russian bear. What do you mean take a while? That's not what we heard. You were hyping us up, and you give us this? So they say it's clear that this operation will take a while. Ukraine is trying to do something that has not been successfully accomplished, perhaps ever before. Really? Okay. They say they are trying to execute a wide-scale offensive with the use of armored vehicles without air supremacy against an entrenched enemy that possesses a large supply of defensive weaponry. Do you know anything about the Second World War? What does this mean? Never been done before. And they say that Ukrainians are having to contend with the fact that now they need to send forces forward, including tanks, APCs, and other vehicles, and they must operate in an environment in which they are threatened by a large number of different systems, such as the almost ubiquitous handheld anti-vehicle missile. Well, hold on a second, man, because you were telling us that the ATGM, the anti-tank guided missiles, that the Americans were giving the Ukrainians were the reason that Russian tanks were being wiped out, like a knife through butter, right? Weren't they saying that last year, around this time last year? They were saying, oh, these Russian tanks are being devoured, right? Thanks to the anti-tank missiles that we supplied Ukraine, or have been supplying Ukraine actually since 2014. Let me show you. I sat through this press conference this morning. I suffered through this. God, it was like 30 minutes long, which is it's longer than they can read, these people. But here's Lloyd Austin and some other general, General Milley, right there he is, U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman. Listen to them talking about Ukraine's counteroffensive, okay?
So, Dan, it would be very premature to put any estimates of how long time on an operation of this magnitude. There are several 100,000 Russian troops dug in prepared positions all along the front line. And Ukraine has begun their attack, and they are making steady progress. This is a very difficult fight. It is a very violent fight, and it will likely take a considerable amount of time and at high cost. But at the end of the day, as Napoleon once said, the moral is to the physical as 3 is to 1. And
yeah, Napoleon also lost against the Russians, but okay.
The Ukrainian morale, their leadership, their skill, their tenacity, their resilience is very high. The Russians, on the other hand, their leadership is not necessarily coherent. Their troops' morale is not high. They've been sitting in defensive positions. Many of them don't even know why they're there. So we'll see. It's too early to tell, but we'll see how this plays out.
You see this now, like, oh, it's about, oh, we have better morale than the Russians. The Russians don't even know why they're there. You know, they are just propagandized robots that are being sent to the front lines. They have no clue what's going on. But don't worry, right? Because the morale is going to win the war against Russia. Why did you give all this equipment then? I mean, I think they should have just been upfront and said, look, there's no point even giving you this stuff, you know, to get it just for the sake of getting it off our hands. Because you guys, the Ukrainians, you've been using Soviet equipment, Russian equipment for decades. That's what you're trained on. That's what you know. So we'll try and procure those things and give them to you so that you can actually operate, you know, more successfully in battle and you don't end up like this. Because this is just a con job, okay, all of this. This is about giving away the old stock, right? Get rid of the old stock so that we can restock with newer models. And of course, who benefits from this? It's military-industrial complex, right? Whether it's the European military-industrial complex or the American one. I mean, they're really two birds of a feather, right? The idea is the same. And keep in mind, you know, Germany, which claims to be a country that doesn't profit off of wars or get involved in wars or send weapons to countries at war. You know, first of all, they publicly broken this, right? But they were doing this before in Yemen and finding loopholes, right? So instead of sending the weapons directly to Saudi Arabia, they would send them to Italy, and then Italy would send them to Saudi Arabia. Yeah, okay, but it's still a German vehicle, isn't it? So my point here is that, you know, they've got all these older model tanks that some countries in Europe have bought from Germany if they're Leopards, or you know, they have some of them have maybe you know, F-16s that they want to get rid of. So it's about getting rid of them and then buying newer ones from those companies, from Boeing, from Lockheed Martin, and so on, and they get richer, or BAE Systems, right? There's so much money being poured into this. That's what this is about. It's not about, oh, let's end the war. Because if you were serious about ending the war, you wouldn't do things like this, right? You wouldn't create carnages like this. You would send qualified diplomats who know how to do their jobs, and you would just negotiate and get it done with, instead of, you know, having send Boris Johnson to pull Zelensky out. And how's that been going? Like, how many Ukrainians have been killed and Russians since March of last year? How many? It's a lot. What good did that do, right? Since they stopped the negotiations, nothing. So they don't do anything diplomatically, right? Or I should say, Washington don't allow Kiev to do anything in terms of negotiations. And then on top of it, when it comes to the battlefield, they say, "Oh, we're going to win with morale." A few seconds ago, you were saying they were going to win with Western tanks. Which one is it? Let me show you this this excerpt here from same guy, right? Same press conference that I had to sit through. I mean,
through a global effort, more than 6,000 Ukrainians are being trained right now at 40 different locations, training locations, in 65 courses in 33 nations on 3 continents.
It's like this guy just discovered an atlas, you know. Wow, we have things called continents? Oh, no. But he said 6,000 Ukrainians. Do you know how many they've lost in the last couple of days since the counteroffensive began? The estimates are around 8,000, right? So let's say that the Russians are you know, using this figure. Okay, fine. Then tone it down to 6,000 or 5,000. Are those acceptable losses? Dude, it's 5,000 people. just wasted like that. For what? For this? For 7 villages, according to, what was it, Reuters? Yeah, 7 villages. You know, whether you like the Russians or not, you can't change the fact that they've been dug in, and they are not the ones moving forward or trying to move forward. Now it's the other way around. It's the Ukrainians who are trying to penetrate through their positions. Okay, so the advantage is to the Russians, right? They have had all this while to build a giant network of even in Crimea, by the way, right, where you don't have anywhere near. You have stuff happening in the Black Sea, but nothing near the level of conflict that you have in Zaporizhia and eastern Ukraine. So look at this. Just look at how they've fortified since October 2022. Look how much they fortified here. This is a huge line. Now, at the same time, you look at that and say, well, actually, the Ukrainians have luck on their side, because when you have an enemy that is so spread out, you have such a wide line, you have many opportunities to break through, right? And then they look at these tank carnages in the media and say, oh, well, they're testing the Russians' weakness spots, right? Yes, it's true, but this is beyond the testing. Look how many tanks right there. That Jesus. So the Russians have been building all of this stuff. It's very difficult to get through. But they've been selling this myth that all it takes are is our benevolence, right? Our benevolence, our charity, our generosity, and our kindness of giving. Oh, we donate our tanks to the Ukrainians so they can fend off these Russians that we don't like. It doesn't work like that. You have predetermined levels of how many tanks should be in your arsenal in every country, right? They have different levels. When you get rid of these tanks, you don't just donate them. You need to replace them, right? And you'll have countries saying, well, actually, we retired these, so they're not actually part of our our arsenal. What does that change? Have $80 billion plus have they not been sent towards military packages, military aid packages to Ukraine? They have. That's $80 billion. That's no joke. We're not talking about small fries here, right? So you can spin it any way you like. It doesn't change the fact that this is a money-making machine. And this idea of some, a brilliant Ukrainian counteroffensive, what do you mean you're drone striking the Kremlin? What are you trying to start a nuclear war? I mean, this whole thing is like trying to start a nuclear war. It's like they've lost their brains. They don't understand that, as much as you hate the Russians, you have a balance of power. You can't just go drone striking the fucking Kremlin. Why do I have to explain this? Like, these people they've lost their goddamn minds. They have lost it. If you know your Cold War history, just imagine the idea of the Americans, of NATO, sending drones to the Kremlin in the Cold War. Like that sounds crazy. That sounds insane. And yet this is happening. Like this is a thing. This happened. Oh my God. They have lost their minds. Let me show you someone else who has lost his mind. This is Trump's defense secretary, right? So Mark Esper. Let's take a look at what he had to say.
It's a very significant moment. Everybody is looking to Ukraine to be very successful. I was in Europe 2 weeks ago for about 2 weeks, and the number one question over there is where. Wow,
I've never heard such, I've never heard wiser words imparted. I was in Europe 2 weeks ago for about 2 weeks. Sorry, I'm just making fun. I'll let him say what he wants to say.
Over there is where is U.S. support, and everybody fairly thinks that if Ukraine does well, U.S. support will continue. If not, it could wither. And if U.S. support withers, then a lot of other countries will go with it. So it's very important, I think Ukraine understands this politically, not just militarily, that they have a very successful counteroffensive that shows people a return on their investment in the Ukrainian military.
We know return on their investment? What are you investing in a baseball team? What do you mean return on investment? He's talking about this like he's sending his child off to some match or something. Like if you do well, then my support will increase, and if you don't do well, my support will wither. I want a return on investment. You know this is a country, right? Like there are people there. Jesus Christ. I kind of appreciate the candor and honesty, because he's not joking. He's not joking, right? Like he this is the thing with some people, is that they don't know how to, they slip up sometimes, and they have a Freudian slip and the truth comes out. Now with Trump, I think, and we'll get to Trump in a second and that whole issue, but he wasn't less corrupt. He's just, he had a big mouth, and they don't like big mouths, because you have to play the game and hide it and obfuscate what you're doing when you have, you hold power that big. So let me just play this again, because I couldn't believe my ears. I still can't believe my ears. Like, listen how he's speaking about this.
Just militarily, that they have a very successful counteroffensive that shows people a return on their investment in the Ukrainian military.
We know that some groups of
I thought you're donating them because you want to defend democracy and, people's right to resist and all this blah, blah, blah. What do you mean return on investment? What investment? I can't with these people. There's only so much I can take, They've lost it. They think that this is a video game or something, But in the old days, if you wanted to start a war, you're the one at the front. You have to lead the charge, right? But now these people, the people in power, they become too comfortable, right? This guy, not only is he no longer Secretary of Defense, but he's all the way in Washington. He's on the other side of the planet. This is like, he's talking about some far off, land where nothing affects. Maybe people like him, it doesn't affect them. They have nuclear bunkers and they have places they can hide, I suppose. And their children don't get sent off to war. But back then, if you wanted to start war, you have to be in the front, right? But now they think that there are no consequences. No, there are lots of consequences, and giving tanks to Ukraine, return on investment. Honestly, the clip speaks for itself. That's it. Let's talk about Trump. Let's get to Trump, because this whole issue with the documents. I mean, it's once again, I come back to it because now, he's been arrested, and they've given him they've given him quite the walloping. So just give me a sec. All right, there we go. So, oh man. Okay, so let's talk about Donald Trump, right? He's been arrested, right? And the indictment against him has been unsealed. So essentially, you have 37 counts against him. The majority of those 31, I believe, are Espionage Act. So in total, he's looking at 400 years in prison. Right, and the other charges are conspiracy and obstruction of justice. Right, so just in a nutshell, basically Donald Trump, when he left the Oval Office, when he was no longer president, he took boxes full of photographs, memorabilia, souvenirs, documents, and a lot of those documents were marked classified and top secret. Okay, so I will get to the issue of overclassification in a second, but he took a lot of these things, and then the people who keep presidential records in an archive, right? The National Archive. They contacted Trump and his lawyers, and they said, you need to hand over these documents. And then he did, right? And this is, I'm telling you what is alleged in the indictment, okay? And I'll show it to you in a second here. So, they're saying that Trump did hand over some documents, but not all of them, because they have a list of these things, and they said, well, this are missing. And then, basically, this went to a grand jury, right? And they subpoenaed him for the documents, and he ignored it. And then they raided his house, and then they found more documents. And when I say his house, I'm talking about the Mar-a-Lago club that he has in Palm Beach in Florida. Okay, and you saw these infamous photographs like this one here that the FBI took when they raided his house. I mean, I don't know if this was actually as exactly as they found it, or if they had like neatly although neatly is kind of an oxymoron here, but if they had purposely, laid out the documents to kind of show how Donald Trump was carelessly storing them and so on, I have no clue. But this is the idea, right? This is the image that they're trying to foster here, that, he kept these things recklessly, and they were in his basement, and that because Mar-a-Lago is a club, they have movie premieres, they have dinners, they have like 150 people just working there alone, 150 people. So, the Secret Service, because he's a former president, they have to protect him, right? If you're president, you're also banned from driving for the rest of your life, because you don't have the necessary technique and skills to evade some potential assassin or whatever, right? My point is that you continue to receive protection by the official Secret Service. And he never told them that he had these documents in the house. So the point here that they're trying to convey is that he not only took the documents, he not only refused to hand them over, he also stored them in such a careless manner, right? At a place where you had tons of people, visitors, tens of thousands of people coming there for events or staying there. So hypothetically, anyone could have accessed these things or potentially accessed them. That's what they're trying to convey here. So, they say here on January 17th, this is from the indictment, okay? It's like about 41 pages long. They say on January 17th, nearly 1 year after Trump left office and after months of demands by the National Archives and Records Administration for him to provide all missing presidential records, Trump provided only 15 boxes, which contained 197 documents with classification markings. Then on June 3rd, in response to a grand jury subpoena demanding the production of all documents with classification markings, Trump's attorney provided the FBI, so the Federal Bureau of Investigation, 38 more documents with classification markings. Then on August 8th, pursuant to a court-authorized search warrant, the FBI recovered from Trump's office and storage room at the Mar-a-Lago Club 102 more documents with classification markings. Now you can see here, by the way, they mentioned Trump's co-conspirator. This indictment is United States versus Donald Trump and Nauta, I'm not quite sure how to say his surname, but basically this guy was in the United States Navy, and Trump was using him essentially as a valet, as they refer to in the indictment as a body man, right? He's basically like a personal aide. It's really that simple. And they're basically saying that both of them obstructed justice, and because he was Donald Trump's personal aide, that perhaps Donald Trump conspired with him to do this, right? That's the point here. And then of course up here they allege also that they allege that Trump endeavored to have his attorney lie to the FBI, right? Falsely represent to the FBI and grand jury that Trump did not have documents called for by the grand jury subpoena. So they're basically saying that Trump told his lawyer to lie to the FBI. And then that Trump also directed his personal aide, Waltine Nauta, to move boxes of documents to conceal them from Trump's own lawyer, the FBI, and the grand jury. They also allege that Trump suggested that his attorney hide or destroy documents called for by the grand jury subpoena, and et cetera, right? So this thing is quite long, and I read through it, and I have several things to say about this. In Washington, D.C., when they say classified, this could mean literally anything. This could mean, as they're suggesting in the news, there was, battle plan attacks against Iran, I think it was, or, they're saying it was Trump had documents relating to the nuclear program. I mean, to the nuclear weapons in the United States, and to foreign maps and so on. I mean, that maybe that's true. The problem is, though, that a personal note, the description of, I don't know, a dinner that someone had eaten could be classified in Washington, D.C. There's a problem of what is called overclassification. Literally anything as trivial and as mundane and as boring as possible can just be stamped classified, and then suddenly it becomes a crime to disseminate it or possess it or so on. So you have to take with a pinch of salt, with a large pinch of salt, what they mean when they say classified. It could literally mean anything, because there is such a bureaucracy, there is such a habit, and this is the status quo in Washington, of classifying anything, no matter how trivial and dumb it is. So that, you have to take that into consideration, okay? Now, I wanted to show you what Trump said after being arrested, because you have to keep in mind, when he was arrested, right, it was not what you might think of arrest when it comes to somebody else, right? If this was somebody less privileged than Donald Trump, they would have had their passport taken away. That is not the case with Donald Trump. He's allowed to keep his passport. They did not view Donald Trump as a flight risk. Again, if this were somebody else, they would have been banned from leaving the state. So they have to stay in the state. They would not be allowed to leave the country. And as I mentioned first, they would have to hand over their passport. So you would have tons of restrictions placed on this person. And on Trump, this was not the case. So even though he was technically on paper, right, and of course they had to go down, they drove him down there. Even though he was arrested, he was literally out the next second, right? And to be honest, I think everybody is innocent until proven guilty. So obviously, if they think he did that, well, they need to prove it. But my point here is that Donald Trump definitely afforded a lot of privileges that somebody else would not be under the same charges. The other thing I wanted to say is that the Espionage Act, I mean, this is a political a piece of law, of legislation from the beginning, right? Donald Trump is not the first victim of the Espionage Act. As a matter of fact, he himself used it against Julian Assange, right? Who is a publisher. I mean, even Obama had trouble charging or indicting Assange because the guy's a journalist. So if you indict Julian Assange, you got to go after the Washington Post, and you have to go after the New York Times and Spiegel and Le Monde and every newspaper that has ever collaborated with him and published the documents that he disseminated. So Donald Trump he doesn't care, and he says, no, I'm gonna threaten him with 175 years in prison, right? So that's the case that as you guys know, I've been covering at large. So I know very, very well what the Espionage Act is. I'm very familiar with it, and it's kind of really ironic. It's really ironic that Donald Trump used this against Julian Assange, and now he is being charged with the same Espionage Act and also threatened with like hundreds of years in prison. Not very nice, is it? Now, the thing is that Donald Trump, honestly, if in a nutshell, yeah, I think this is definitely politically motivated. You could view it as an attempt to stop him from running as for president in the 2024 election. The thing is, though, that I have a laundry list of crimes that Donald Trump should really be charged for, right? People talk about Vladimir Putin. Oh my God, the International Criminal Court has issued a warrant for his arrest because he's forcibly transferring children in from Ukraine to Russia or whatever. What about Donald Trump? Is the ICC going to go after him? Because I can name a bunch of crimes, right? Like he assassinated General Soleimani. And if you think that this is nothing or it doesn't mean anything, I want to ask you something. How would you feel if somebody assassinated the United States Secretary of Defense? You would be screaming bloody murder. You would want to nuke that person and their country. So what gives Donald Trump the right to assassinate General Soleimani, who is actually much bigger than a Secretary of Defense if you actually know who he is and what he's done, right? He's a very prominent leader in the axis of resistance. So this garbage that, oh my God, he's so evil, he killed U.S. troops. What the hell are U.S. troops doing in the region in the first place? Go home. You got no business being there. If you don't go there, nobody get killed. Don't start wars, right? So this argument that Donald Trump and Mike Pompeo spouted, I'm like, oh my God, he's a terrorist. Go home. Mind your business. General Soleimani would be out of a job if he would just go home. He'd have literally nothing to do. He would be out of a job if you're so concerned, right? So Donald Trump, number one, he murdered someone. He assassinated someone on a diplomatic mission. Keep in mind, Soleimani was at the personal invitation of the Iraqi prime minister in Baghdad International Airport. So he was on a diplomatic mission. Okay, he assassinated someone he assassinated Soleimani, putting sanctions on Syria, putting sanctions on Venezuela, putting sanctions on Iran. You know, each one of these things is its own crime. You know, people want to act like Donald Trump is some kind of angel, and you know, he never started a war. Well, he certainly continued the wars that were given to him. Does he have to start new wars to be, you know, to be evil? What about continuing wars? What about what he did in, you know, in Iraq, with Afghanistan and with Syria and all of these covert operations with the CIA running around? What about that? Why doesn't he keep his own forces in check? Why doesn't he close Guantanamo Bay? Right? That's another thing. What about Guantanamo Bay? Torturing people is okay. So, you know, and sanctions, siege warfare, these, you know, these are, in my opinion, and anybody who's sane and honest and objective, when you put sanctions on a country, it's like besieging them in, you know, in the Middle Ages. You would surround a city and starve people to death. It's the same thing. It's literally the modern equivalent of that. So these are wars, in my opinion. When you sanction a country, you're declaring war against them, economic warfare. You know, and then of course Julian Assange, I mentioned earlier. This is going to war with the press. You know, indicting journalists with the Espionage Act, ironically. So how come there none of this is mentioned? I think these are definitely crimes, and you can easily prove them. So yeah, you know, honestly, I don't really care about Donald Trump keeping some quote unquote classified documents in his basement in Mar-a-Lago. I'm more concerned with him going to war with the press, starving people, depriving them of medicine, depriving them of food. You know, trying to coup the government in Venezuela, you know, with this failed Bay of Pigs, this Bay of Piglets, trying to, you know, attempting to overthrow the government in Venezuela. Yeah, these are really serious crimes. Why doesn't anyone in Washington D.C. or MSNBC or CNN, why don't they talk about those crimes? You know why? Because they agree with this behavior. They would do the exact same thing. Where's the proof? Joe Biden is in power and he's doing the exact same things. He's still stealing oil from Syria, which is something that Donald Trump started doing, at least publicly, right? It's not giving a damn. It's like 40 containers. Just pump that oil, take it to El Walid border crossing, and off you go, or to the American bases, right? So why don't they talk about this, right? Because they're criminals just like him. So, you know, just because Donald Trump is the victim of a political witch hunt doesn't mean that he's, you know, absolved of actual crimes that he's committed. But in any case, I was waiting to show you all these videos before I go on my rant, but I've gone on my rant. So let's look at what Donald Trump had to say.
Very badly. This is called election interference, and yet another attempt to rig and steal a presidential election. More importantly, it's a political persecution like something straight out of a fascist or a communist nation. This day will go down in infamy, and Joe Biden will forever be remembered as not only the most corrupt president in the history of our country, but perhaps even more importantly, the president who, together with a band of his closest thugs, misfits, and Marxists, tried to destroy American democracy. But they will fail, and we will win bigger and better than ever before. Charging a former president of the United States under the Espionage Act of 1917.
I love how he's so shocked. He's like, I can't believe they would use the Espionage Act against me. Oh boy. These frivolous criminals. You used it yourself, man. Why are you so surprised? You don't like a taste of your own medicine? Huh?
Wasn't meant for this. An act for a crime so heinous that only the death penalty would do, and threatening me with 400 years in prison for possessing my own presidential papers, which just about every other president has done, is one of the most outrageous and vicious legal theories ever put forward in an American court of law. The Espionage Act has been used to go after traitors and spies. It has nothing to do with a former president legally keeping his own documents.
I mean, again, the irony here is too much for me to handle. I will add something though, that the people that I'm about to show to you, I have a bunch of videos lined up. A lot of them are former Donald Trump, Trump administration officials, and you can see how they're all turning against him, right? Turning on him, stabbing him in the back, whatever you want to call it. There are many ways to describe this kind of behavior. I mean, Donald Trump should have known, right? You put neocons and people like this, in your entourage. Well, what do you expect? It is Washington, D.C. after all. But, I have no doubt in my mind whatsoever that former presidents, Barack Obama, George Bush, whoever pick whoever you want, they all have classified documents. No question about it. No question about it. Mike Pompeo, who I'm about to play to you, this guy's goddamn suit is probably made of classified documents. Literally, right? It was made out of classified documents. And just listen to him speak, okay? Just listen.
And I've said this before with respect to the classified documents. Every one of us who ever served, I had thousands of classified documents in my possession over the 4 years in the executive branch and in Congress. We have a responsibility to handle them appropriately, and those of us who don't ought to be held accountable for that, no matter which party they're from. Biden's stuff in his garage next to his Corvette, or the documents that appear to have been down at Mar-a-Lago. When you make a mistake, you need to own it, Neil, and I hope that everyone who takes this sacred duty of protecting this information will do that.
Chris Christie.
He's so funny. He's like, I'm all about, the sacred duties toward the American peoples and stuffs, God, man. I mean, this is Mike Pompeo. He's lost a little bit of weight, so you might not recognize him, but there was a clip that I always play to you where he says, "We lied, we cheated, we stole," right? That's what he described his time at the CIA like, right? So hold on, let me pull this up. We lied, we cheated, we stole, right? He's kind of funny. He's really funny. He's like a cartoon character in my opinion.
When I was a cadet, what's the cadet motto at West Point? You will not lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate those who do. I was the CIA director. We lied, we cheated, we stole. It was like we had entire training courses.
I'm sure you did. He's really like a cartoon villain. But you see, this is Donald Trump's CIA director, right? And then Secretary of State. And you see how they're all pulling the knives out. And I'm not exactly crying for Donald Trump. I really couldn't care less. But I am very aware of the the public skewering that they're giving him, and I'm pointing it out to you. So there's his CIA chief. How about Vice President, Donald Trump's own Vice President, right? This is Mike Pence. Take a look.
Look, no one's above the law, and we're all entitled to the presumption.
That's the problem, though,
of innocence.
That's the argument from the other side. Is that some people seems to be a two-tiered justice system. That's what the Trump supporters would say. Is there something to that?
Well, of course there is, Joe. I mean, we lived through it. I mean, we saw Hillary Clinton engage in this kind of behavior with regard to classified materials, and to be given a pass in 2016, we saw 2.5 years of the Russia hoax that now, thanks to the Durham report, we know is an investigation that should have never even been started. And we've seen a Justice Department that seems to have a two-tiered system of justice. None of that changes the fact, though, that the handling of classified materials is a very serious matter, not only from my years as vice president, but also my years on the International Relations Committee. And look, I had a chance to review the indictment over the weekend. And this indictment contains serious charges, and I cannot defend what is alleged.
Oh man, this is really something. It's really something, man. Here, let me show you Chris Christie. Now, all you need to know about Chris Christie is that Donald Trump once squashed him. I remember I was watching the presidential debates, as I always did. I'm doing since I was a child. But this one was from 2016, right? So this is when Donald Trump entered the race, and they were all on the debate stage, and you had the other Bush, Jeb, right, and Chris Christie, and I don't quite remember the joke. I just remember Donald Trump like demolishing them all, really crushing them, like making absolute mincemeat out of them, and Chris Christie was one of them. So I'm not surprised that he would hold a grudge. But let's listen to what he had to say, because now Mike Pence, who I just showed you, has Donald Trump's vice president, has jumped into the race all of a sudden, right? Maybe they see an opening. Oh, Donald Trump's going to jail. Okay, maybe I can, maybe it's my turn. Let's take a look at what Chris Christie had to say.
And the conduct in there is awful.
Hold on. You need to slow down, man. You're too fast.
Indictment, and the conduct in there is awful. I mean, put aside taking the documents in the first place, but then when you start getting
just 1 second, I know I just let the man start, but he said the conduct in there is awful. You need to understand something about the U.S. Judicial system is that conduct is a way for the prosecutor to kind of smear you and allege that you did something criminal without actually bringing a charge, right? So they might not have enough evidence for something, or the entire case, is something that is not really true. So in order to make you look like a criminal and make the charges stick, this is what they have. They have alleged conduct, which is like storytelling time. You sit the class down and you start telling them stories, or it's making things up. It could be anything. And given that this is also an Espionage Act case, as I covered with Assange's case, which is also Espionage Act, they had a second indictment that came out all of a sudden out of nowhere, and you have alleged conduct, all this fantastical storytelling, this complete fantasy. So I just wanted to make that point, right?
Taking the documents in the first place. But then when you start getting asked, Anderson, in May of 21, nicely, with a letter from the archivist saying, could you please give them back? And you ignore it. Then they come with a grand jury subpoena. And then according to the indictment, you tell your lawyers, tell them we don't have anything, even though you have dozens and dozens of boxes of material. That's obstruction of justice if it's true. And so I think the former Attorney General is absolutely right. And look, I did this for 7 years in New Jersey. We did 130 political corruption prosecutions without a loss. What I could tell you for sure I know about that indictment is there's probably about a third of the evidence they actually have is in that indictment.
There's a lot more.
There will guaranteed be a lot more. When you're a prosecutor, you never put every card on the table before the trial. And so there's going to be a lot more.
As indictments, I mean, you've had a lot of experience with indictments. This one is very detailed.
It is. It's what we call in the business a speaking indictment. Because remember, when you're the prosecutor, you can't comment beyond what's in the four corners of that document. So I think that Jack Smith understood that the American people were going to need a fulsome explanation if you're going to bring an indictment against the former president of the United States, and I think he was right. So that is much more detail than you'd see in the typical indictment. But also, don't be fooled. There's a lot more information to come when they go to trial. Specifically, I think there are going to be a lot of witnesses who actually worked for Donald Trump who are now going to be testifying against him.
In the third.
Yeah, I mean, I have no doubt, right? It's once again, it's politics. It's dirty game. It's the dirtiest game of them all. Which again, I'm not crying for Trump, but it is what it is. Here's another one. I mean, you shouldn't be surprised at John Bolton being in this list because he it's been long since since he turned against Trump, and you remember when Trump fired him, he went and wrote some book, and nevertheless, I'll play what he had to say.
Billion population. If he has anything like what the indictment alleges, and of course the government will have to prove it, then he has committed very serious crimes. This is a devastating indictment. I speak here as an alumnus of the Justice Department myself, because not only is it powerful, it's very narrowly tailored. They didn't throw everything up against the wall to see what would stick. This really is a rifle shot, and I think it should be the end of Donald Trump's political career.
He's obviously made clear he doesn't think that's going to be the case.
Well, for what it's worth, that's what John Bolton had to say. I mean, when you surround yourself with neocons, Let me play you Bill Barr, right? So this is Donald Trump's attorney general.
That's a different question. But when you think about somebody like President Obama or President Clinton, the sock drawer case with President Clinton, they'll point to these and say, listen,
so there are two big lies, I think, that are out there right now. One is, oh, these other presidents took all these documents. Those were situations where they arranged with the archives to set up special space under the management, control, and security provided by the archivist to temporarily put documents until the libraries were ready. These were not people just putting them in their basement, okay? And the second thing that the president, this idea that the president has complete authority to declare any document personal is obvious. It's facially ridiculous. That opinion had to do with the distinction between official records, which are records prepared by government agencies for the purpose of government action, and personal documents as opposed to official documents, which are things prepared by the president, such as a diary or notes, which are not used in the government's deliberations. And yes, as to the second class, stuff that the president himself generates, the president has some discretion. But these are official documents. It's inarguable.
Yeah, once again, what does that mean, official documents? They classify anything. It could be a picture of a hamburger, and if it's marked classified, you know, that's it. And, you know, I'll just draw a distinction here. You know, Joe Biden, they also found classified documents. And the matter of the fact is that Joe Biden was not the president at this time. These are from the time of his vice presidency, right? So he did not have the right to declassify or classify any documents, right? The president has that right. So if you're going to make this argument, then Trump does win, right? You know, he was the president. He certainly was the president. You know, the fact that we're supposed to believe like Hillary Clinton and you know, with this whole email scandal, like she did everything by the book, and you know, Bill Clinton never took any documents, and Barack Obama. Oh, come on, man. This guy, Bill Barr, Mike Pompeo, they probably got classified documents in their pockets, right? Oh, God, it's on the tip of my tongue. I forgot who this was. There was some guy, I swear to God, he tried stuffing classified documents in his pants and smuggling them out. Jesus, how the hell did I forget this guy's name? Hold on, I'll look it up in a second. But, you know, my point here is that Donald Trump is guilty of many crimes. I'm not sure that this is one of them. There's definitely a political element to this. Does that mean we're going to cry for Trump? Absolutely not. You know, all of these people that I just showed you are, you know, they're just as corrupt. They're just as evil. Half of them were in his administration, right? So that speaks volumes. You know, it doesn't absolve them of anything that now they're, you know, speaking against him. They just want to have, you know, they just want to stay in the spotlight. And some of them, you know, like Pence and Chris Christie, think that this is their opening. Like, okay, Trump is going away. Perhaps I better jump in the race. I mean, let me show you this clip here. This is from Tucker Carlson, and this video that he did went extremely viral, right? And he's basically outlining some of the points about how you know, Trump made mistakes with you know, he made a mistake with who he surrounded himself with and so on. Yeah, I mean, you know, you're putting it a bit mildly, but you know, there's this sentiment in Tucker Carlson's video that he's trying to like make this point that Donald Trump is somehow, you know, he's separate from the establishment and he is completely different, and that's why they're going after him. No, he's not. He's not completely different. I just, you know, 10, 15 minutes ago, I was talking to you about a list of crimes that he did, you know, murdering Soleimani, putting sanctions on Syria, putting sanctions on Venezuela, sanctions on Iran, you know, depriving people of medicine, depriving people of their food, depriving people of their economic rights, their human rights, attacking the press, using the same Espionage Act, you know, he's getting a taste of his own medicine, frankly, right? Using Espionage Act against Assange, going to war with the press, you know, criminalizing national security journalism. How on God's green earth do you consider this being different from the Washington, D.C. establishment? He's not different. He's a loudmouth. That's it. That's the only way in which he is different. He just, you know, he like in the Oval Office, he says, we're keeping the oil. We're taking the oil. Whose oil? It's not your oil. You're not the president of Syria. What are you doing in Syria? Stealing oil. You don't have the right to keep anyone's oil. Go home. Why are you trying to coup the government in Venezuela? Right? What about the embassy, the U.S. embassy that he moved to Jerusalem? So he's violating UN Security Council Resolution 242 and numerous others, right? That clearly say that Jerusalem is not the embassy Jerusalem is not the capital of Israel. Any annexation, which also happened, and any laws which passed by the Israelis called the Jerusalem Law. All of this is null and void. Israel has no jurisdiction in Jerusalem. Jerusalem is not the capital of Israel, period. And Trump violates this. And he goes also to the Golan Heights as well. So he's going to Jerusalem and the Syrian Golan Heights, which are occupied also by Israel and also illegally annexed by Israel. And he's saying this is Israel. Who are you to decide it's Israel? Based on what? You're violating your own, keep in mind, these UN Security Council resolutions. They were all the United States voted in favor or abstained in all of the cases. So they never tried to block it, right? Like what Israel is doing in Jerusalem and the Golan Heights is so egregious. It's so bad. Even the United States State Department and White House couldn't condone it. They were like, no, we can't help you. You need to leave. You need to go, right? Or they abstained at the very least. So they basically let it through. They let it pass, right? They didn't block it or veto it. And Trump violates that. Gee, I mean, I'm running out of hands here trying to count the crimes, you know? So, Donald Trump, I'm sorry, he's not a victim, and he's not innocent, and he's not, he never drained the swamp. He literally surrounded himself with swamp creatures. What do you call Mike Pompeo? What do you call John Bolton? These are angels? At best, Donald Trump is someone with very, very poor judgment who has no clue who to pick in his cabinet. And, just for that alone, he should never be in a position of power like President of the United States because he surrounds himself with people like John Bolton, like Mike Pompeo, and I don't give a rat's ass that they are stabbing him in the back. I care about their policies, right? How they are injuring and causing suffering to people in the United States and outside the United States. That's what Donald Trump did. He's no different than other presidents, and he's really just getting a taste of his own medicine. So yes, in many ways, Donald Trump is a victim of a political witch hunt. He's still, is he an angel? No, he's not an angel. And the fact that it's the Espionage Act and he used that against Assange, he is getting a taste of his own medicine. What do you want me to say? I don't like laughing at somebody else's misfortune. But, this guy, he caused so much suffering. He refused to pardon Assange. So he's like, screw this. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to pardon mass murdering, psychotic mercenaries from Blackwater who massacred civilians in Iraq. I'm going to pardon, criminals. But I'm not going to pardon the guy that I'm trying to prosecute, and throw in jail for 2 centuries. Well, how do you like it now? Not nice, is it? It's not nice. Let me continue with I'm not even halfway done. I still have tons of things to go through with you guys. So man, this thing made me laugh. I hope that you're gonna laugh just as much as I did because this killed me. When I saw this. When I saw this, I couldn't believe my eyes. So let me show you what's going on here. You have the Israeli embassy in Canada posting a photo of falafel, and they've stuck Israeli flags on every single ball. I mean, the way that people slaughtered this post on social media, on Twitter, is staggering. I died laughing. This is so funny, right? It's so funny. First of all, I'm just going to say that falafel oftentimes looks like a ring, okay? It doesn't look like balls with Israeli flags in them. And the fact that they're sticking Israeli flags in every single ball, like they're trying so hard to claim this food as Israeli, when everybody knows this is an Arab dish. Even Arabs don't agree, like, who created it first. Even Arabs fight amongst themselves who created falafel. What was it the Egyptians? Was it the Syrians, the Lebanese? They're going to compete. Everyone wants to claim it. And so who the hell are the Israelis to come and pretend that it's an Israeli dish? Look at the rate, how they got ratioed. Absolutely destroyed. Absolutely destroyed. You got 3,000 quote tweets on this. Somebody posted this saying, I so enjoy authentic Israeli cuisine to go with Israeli history and heritage. Oh my God, man, she slaughtered me. Oh man, it's so empty, it's so void. Here's somebody here who said, art imitating life, imitating art. So you have a nice graphic here that says how to make Israeli salad, and there's a guy from the IDF just like kicking in this door and putting his jackboot on a Palestinian's face, right? That's it. There's nothing to it but violence, right? And here someone said, today we honor the beloved falafel, a cherished culinary treasure and the national dish of Israel. I always found this picture of Hillary, like, taking the with dreads funny, but this is the best application of that. They just go so well with each other, right? Co-opting other people's culture. Israel stealing land and food since 1948. Yep, that's pretty much accurate. Here somebody said, today we honor the beloved cheeseburger, a cherished culinary treasure and national dish of Lebanon. Yep, this is what I said. If it were truly yours, you would not have felt the need to put a flag on every little falafel. And here, this is a measured response. So somebody said, if falafel was a Jewish thing, then how come falafel didn't emerge from France or Poland, right? And if falafel is an Israeli thing, how come my grandparents ate falafel for breakfast when they were kids? They were born 3 decades prior to Israel even existing. The treasure national Israeli dish is stolen from Egypt, just like Eilat. I mean, again, as a Syrian, I'd say it's Syrian, but okay. I'll fight you on this. Better for the Egyptians to take it than the Israelis, right? And here somebody said, this is hilarious because Israelis were never actually part of the region and came from different places to start living on the land. So they don't have any indigenous cuisine. They simply take the Arab dishes and advertise them as their own, right? And then Jamal said, I'm so blessed to have learned to enjoy falafel from Israeli colonial settlers from Poland, from Russia, Ukraine, Germany, Belarus, and finally Brooklyn. You guys, you might think that this is a trivial issue, like it's just a dish. It's not trivial whatsoever, because the Israelis, wherever they go, right, whether they're opening a restaurant in China or doing a bake sale, they will try to take Arabic dishes. Not try, they do. They take Arabic dishes and they try to ram this down your throat that it's Israeli. It's not Israeli. People have been eating this long before anyone even heard of something called Israel. Okay? And like the other person said, if it's Jewish, then how come it didn't emerge in Poland, right? Or France, or, how come it didn't, no one was making that there, right? So this is it, and falafel is just one example. You have tons of other examples where they're trying to take and co-opt what you would call, cultural appropriation. They're taking the culture and trying to, masquerade whatever it is, whether it's a piece of clothing or it's food. They're trying to masquerade that this is theirs. It's indigenous to them. This is completely ludicrous. It's ridiculous, right? Israel is a made up country. It was created by the United Kingdom, and it's bankrolled by the United States. There's nothing to it, man. Everybody who's Israeli. The vast, overwhelming majority of them are not from this place. They either, at best, they come from next door. So that doesn't make it Israeli, right? And as I've told you guys before, you know, you look at the list of Israeli prime ministers, every single one, they're from Eastern Europe, either themselves, they were born there in Eastern Europe, or their parents or their grandparents. Every single one. Now you tell me that that this is their dish. Also, I want to ask you something. What does that mean, Jewish food, when someone says it's not Israeli? Well, it's Jewish. Do you have Islamic dishes and Christian food? What does that even mean? Why, like, since when is food categorized by religion or the religion of people who eat it? I've never heard something in my whole life so as ludicrous. Because some people tried to say that. Well, you know, yeah, okay, it's not Israeli, but you know it's Jewish. So it says, what do you mean? Why can't you just say this is Levantine food or it's Egyptian food? It's from here. That's it. Period. The sentence is complete. No. We gotta pretend that this is a country, right? So you gotta steal the land and then steal the people's food and then pretend that this is your country. That's what Israel has been doing for, you know, since its inception. That's it. Period. Right? Steal the culture, steal the food, steal the land, and pretend like you know, you are from there. And I'll show you in a little bit this clip of Netanyahu saying, "Oh, we've been here for 3,000 years." Motherfucker, you're from Poland. Your parents are from Ukraine and Poland or something like that. You know, he's from Eastern Europe. What do you mean 3,000 years? Can any of you watching? Can any of you trace back your family tree, let alone 500? You know, just 500 years, let alone 3,000. I mean, the insanity, like this religious extremism that people have to come up with to justify this kind of behavior. It's incredible, truly incredible. I got some good laughs. I have to say, I got some good laughs. Okay, so let me go through another topic with you guys. This is actually, hold on a second. We got some donations, so I'm gonna shout out the donations, and I want to say thank you to Brad Harris and Reza and Josia and Rulibar and Hadi for all joining on Patreon and supporting the show. I'm very grateful to you guys. And let me see here. We had something on YouTube, so I need to go into the settings and figure out who said what, because it scrolls all the way up there. So give me a second. Man, we have so many things to go through. All right, I'm not even halfway done. So thank you very much to Lukil for the sticker. Julie says, I suggest you don't live the same time as Jay Dore. I don't know who you mean, but I go live whenever I feel like it. So thanks for supporting the show. In any case, let's continue with the topics. This anti-China hysteria, man, is something else. Look at this. So you have the Netherlands just like publicly saying that they are going to limit the number of Chinese students they receive because the Chinese are evil and trying to steal their technology. Yeah, like this is an actual thing, right? So look, this is reported by Financial Times, and the education minister De Graaf said that he was investigating curbs on students funded by the state-run Chinese Scholarship Council after several universities started excluding them on security grounds. Recipients of grants have to swear allegiance to the Communist Party, return to China within 2 years of completing their studies, and report to the Chinese embassy in the country where they study. Says who? What they're employees of the state? They're spies now? I mean, this is ludicrous, right? Also, the fact that they try to frame it as, oh, well, it's a state-run scholarship. What do you mean? Most scholarships in the world are state-run. What the hell does that prove? I mean, this is really like some really, you know, absolute garbage that they're saying here. So De Graaf is saying that, quote, in general, the targeted use of grant programs to obtain high quality knowledge and technology for the state is undesirable. he says that the risk areas, sensitive technologies, are currently being mapped out. The screening will be risk-oriented. The approach can be applied to any country outside the EU, so we are prepared for developments in the threat assessment. What does that mean, any country outside the EU? So I'm guessing China and perhaps Russia, right? Where we have to discriminate against them just for being Chinese and Russian. How dare you excel academically and win a scholarship? Clearly, you are a state spy for the Chinese Communist Party. Yeah, anyone can sound like Mike Pompeo, right? So The Hague has come under pressure from Washington to restrict the transfer of advanced technology to China. It is announced that the most advanced silicon chip making machines for manufacture ASML would require an export license. And then the Dutch trade minister is basically saying that the Chinese, he's saying that if you want a certain technology, you first try to buy it, and then if it doesn't work, you invest, and if that doesn't work, you try to steal it, right? And apparently, this is a bunch of statements from the education and trade minister. That's all it takes. Just statements from them, vague statements. That's enough. And they allow the Dutch universities to do this, right? So they're saying here that gradually all Dutch universities will reduce the number of students from China and reduce research cooperation with Chinese counterparts. This is president of TUE, right? And China's foreign ministry said that it hoped the situation would not be politicized and stigmatized. I mean, once again, you see how polite the Chinese are. I'd have stronger words to say, but yeah. I really find this funny because you have basically a microchip war that's happening right now between the Chinese, and on the other side you have the Netherlands and the United States, right? Because as I read to you, they're requiring an export license now for ASML, and Micron is the other company. So just so you see here, this is from ASML's website, right? They're a microchip producer. The thing is that this is kind of like what we saw with TikTok and Huawei. You have the Chinese that are building excellent technology, and because we don't like that, we don't want to have competition in Europe or in the West, now we have to ban the Chinese, or we have to make it more difficult for them to actually sell their technology, or we have to outright sanction it. Huawei phones, for example, are sanctioned. They even tried kidnapping the CFO, the chief financial officer from Huawei, right? In Canada, she was in Canada. They arrested her on the grounds that the Americans wanted her, and they were going to extradite her. And then the Chinese were like, okay, well, if you want to play games, we're going to sentence these two Canadians on, to death. We're going to put them on death row. And magically, the Canadians they suddenly released the Huawei CFO. Magically, she was no longer guilty or suspected, of any crime. She could magically be released. So, they try to politicize China's success and trying to make it into, they're evil, they're spies, they try to steal our technology, right? So the other argument you hear is that the Chinese are putting TikTok and Huawei in your homes so that they can spy on you, and that everything they all the data they collect is transferred and transmitted to the Chinese Communist Party. Hold on a second, man. I mean, people have barely forgotten about the NSA and Google and Apple and Microsoft and Yahoo and Skype, which belongs to Microsoft, and Facebook and all of these tech companies, all of the major tech companies in America, not only giving data to the NSA, but AT&T literally had a room for NSA to come in and just steal the data, and GCHQ. So on both sides of the Atlantic, you have GCHQ and NSA taking all of this data from these huge tech companies that not only people in America use, but worldwide, spying on people, mass data collection, right? Illegal data collection. And now you're trying to tell me that the Chinese are doing that? This is projection. This is nothing but projection, right? Everything that they do, they start accusing the Chinese of doing because they don't like that China is building better phones, or that TikTok is the #1 app on the App Store. So, Donald Trump, and again, they're trying this now, is that they're trying to get ByteDance, the company that owns TikTok, to sell the app, or else they will be banned. Well, hold on,
why do you think that selling the app to the United States will make it safe suddenly? What kind of argument is that? You just want to steal the app, right? The level of malice here is incredible, truly incredible. And I want to show you here. This is the former finance minister in France, and look what he was saying. Right now, he said this is a momentous change. Chinese universities are overtaking their Western counterparts, with some now ranking higher than Oxford, higher than Cambridge, Princeton, and Caltech in high-quality scientific research, right? So scientific research. 7 out of the top 10 are now from China, okay? So here's the table. This is the Nature Index of universities, right? You have Harvard, then you have, so you all know Harvard and Stanford. I mean, look at them. And of course, MIT. So you have 3 who are American in this table, right? And 7 who are Chinese. So these Chinese universities are overtaking Western ones, but apparently it's the Chinese students who are spies. They're the ones that we have to be afraid of. Well, how do you know someone from Cambridge is not going to, go and steal data from the Chinese or try and spy on the Chinese technology? You think we don't do that? You must be a sucker of unprecedented proportions to think that the UK and the US are not sending so-called students to spy on the Chinese and steal their technology. We invented this type of crap, right? So I think this is really, really dishonest that, we're going to ban Chinese tech and do whatever it takes to squash them just because we don't like competition. Let me show you just quickly this. Oh, and by the way, Canada, when it comes to AIIB, right? Look what they said here. They're freezing ties with them because they're saying it's dominated by communists. So you have people from Canada who probably know nothing about China. They going to China and discovered, oh my God, people are communists here. Yeah, okay. So what? Well, what does that even mean? It's like this sentence I told you, it's state-run. Yes, they most scholarships are state-run. Well, that's so surprising. It's such a narrow worldview. Like, oh, no one can be different from us. They have to be the same. And we are stuck in the 1950s Cold War, and everyone who's not an avowed capitalist is a threat. So let me just show you this video from Mick Wallace, who's an Irish MEP, and what he had to say.
I've lost count of the number of times that we've discussed Hong Kong in here. I'm surprised you're still not giving out about the protests in the place and the treatment of the protesters. Maybe it's because only one protester was killed in 2 years and he wasn't killed by the Chinese police. China got Hong Kong back from the Brits in 1997. Hong Kong had never known anything remotely close to democracy under the Brits. It was an empire. There was a colonial empire and a fairly brutal one. And the idea that we have the right to lecture China about what's going on in Hong Kong. Who in God's name are we to be lecturing anybody? Why don't we actually sort out things in our own place? We're so fond of interfering in other people's business. We were in China for 10 days and we didn't go on an official mission in April. You know what? And it was such an impressive country and such an impressive people. You know what? We should learn to be a bit more tolerant of other cultures and other nations and stop being judgmental and thinking that we're the only ones with values.
I have nothing further to add. Thank you to the gentleman from Ireland. Thank you, Mick Wallace. He wrapped it up very nicely. I owe a crab dance to some of you who joined on Patreon to support the show, so thank you very much for that. And if you're not a member yet, please consider donating $1 or £2 or whatever currency and amount you like per month. That way you're supporting independent media and you help me and allow me to do my work. So here's a crab dance for those who did, and then we'll continue. I have a bunch more things I wanted to talk to you guys about.
Clap for that, you stupid bastard. And Corn Pop was a bad dude. And he ran a bunch of bad boys.
Listen, fuckhead, you have fucking crossed the line. Claiming I'm the enemy. You got that, you goddamn son of a bitch?
I don't give a fuck what you think, bitch.
Good morning. Sunday morning.
Cut that bitch off.
Thank you for Iron Dome, which is a technical marvel.
والله انتوا كلاب بصراحة يعني. ماشي نشتغل عادي.
We lied, we cheated, we stole.
China.
And you ain't black.
There's always the macro and then there's the micro.
Do not come. Do not come.
I'm gonna come.
You talking to me?
Ladies and gentlemen,
I'll have 2 number 9s. A number 9 large.
we got him.
I told myself, I know it's not.
I've fallen and I can't get up. Disgusting!
Why you texting? Why, you're getting nervous, man. Calm down. It's okay. Okay.
Suck my dick and choke on it. I yield my time. Fuck you.
Man, that stuff never gets old, I swear. It never gets old. All right, hold on. Let me close this out and get on to the next topic for you guys. Yeah, this one's very, very big. This one's important. This one's very, very big. So, so the president of Iran, Raisi, he made a really historic visit to Latin America, to South America, right? And he visited 3 countries, so Nicaragua, Cuba, and Venezuela. Actually, Cuba was last, but regardless, I wanted to show you a couple of clips and discuss why this is so important. So here you can see them. There you go. That's Maduro and Raisi. And they signed a bunch of really important memorandums and agreements. So that was Venezuela. This is Nicaragua. That's Ortega.
Raisi, quien inicia a partir de este miércoles, la cual realiza por primera vez luego que asumiera su cargo en agosto.
90 miles from the Americans, right? I bet that made them feel very uneasy, very uneasy with Raisi in their so-called backyard, right? It's so funny, like he's just doing he's just visiting and they get upset. I'll show you in a second. So this is what Raisi said. He said, my trip to Nicaragua comes in line with the policy of expanding ties with independent nations. And he attacked the United States as a bullying power. He said the world would be a better place if they put an end to their despotism and respect the will of other nations. He said that he promised that a new world order was emerging as he heaped praise on Latin America's leftist countries, which have, quote, put up resistance against the dominance and excessive demands of the U.S. and its supporters. And with officials from the 2 sides signing 3 agreements in energy, technology, and healthcare, Raisi talked up Iran's progress in science, expressing readiness to share their experience with friendly nations, right? So this is very important to bear in mind. He's not just coming on a friendly visit, right? They're signing new agreements. Here, I'll show you some more of what he was saying, and there you go.
تجربیات خودمون رو و ظرفیت‌های خودمون رو با کشور دوست و برادرمون نیکاراگوآ به اشتراک بگذاریم. سفر ما به آمریکای لاتین و به کشور دوستمون نیکاراگوآ نشان آن است که اراده سیاسی جمهوری اسلامی بر توسعه روابط با کشورهای مستقل در آمریکای لاتین و با نیکاراگوآ است. دو ملت ایران و نیکاراگوآ تاریخ مشترکی از انقلاب، مقاومت، ایستادگی و مبارزه با دشمنان را دارند. فاصله جغرافیایی ما با کشور نیکاراگوآ و با آمریکای لاتین بسیار است. دلهای ما به هم بسیار نزدیک است.
Right, precisely. So that's the point that I wanted to make, is because they are so far apart, geographically speaking. So, why is Iran's president visiting? Well, what do these countries have in common? Iran, Venezuela, Nicaragua, Cuba. They're all under U.S. blockade, right? They've been crushed for decades by U.S. sanctions, and suffered under what is effectively siege warfare. And it's at the same time very sad, but also so impressive that Cuba, for example, has been under blockade for 60 years, and they produce some of the world's best doctors, and they even send doctors overseas, right, to help other countries. They came up with their own vaccine during the pandemic. Iran, the same thing, by the way, right? So they have excelled in medicine, in science, in defense. And that's why they've withstood the test of time and American sanctions. And I want to show you what Ortega, the Nicaraguan president, had to say here. This is very special. Listen and look at this.
Le rendimos homenaje junto a nuestros héroes y mártires, a todos los héroes y mártires de Irán, y en particular al general Qasem Soleimani, que fue asesinado por el imperialismo yanqui.
که به دست امپریالیسم آمریکایی به شهادت رسید.
Cuando él luchaba contra el terrorismo.
که علیه تروریسم مبارزه میکرد.
Y los yanquis alentaban el terrorismo. Y los yanquis aceptaron tranquilamente.
و آمریکایی‌ها مسئولیتشون هم راحت قبول کردن، مسئولیت این اقدام.
Que habían cometido el crimen.
که مرتکب این جنایت شدن.
Pero eso no doblega al pueblo iraní.
ولی این ملت ایران را وادار به تسلیم نمیکنه.
Y tampoco atemoriza a los pueblos del mundo.
و ملت‌های جهان را هم مورد ترس و تهدید قرار
میده. Que había una condena contra ese crimen.
و در سطح جهانی این جنایت محکوم شد.
Los pueblos han condenado ese crimen.
ملت‌های جهان این جنایت را محکوم کردند.
Y en este día, dándole la bienvenida al presidente de Irán,
و امروز اینجا ما خوش آمد میگیم به آقای رئیس جمهور.
guardamos un minuto de silencio.
و یک دقیقه سکوت میکنیم.
Por el mártir de la República Islámica de Irán, general
Qasem Soleimani. General Qasem Soleimani.
Wow. I mean, that speaks for itself. What more can I say? Honestly, that's very, very important, because it's one thing saying we want to cooperate more and we sympathize with each other, but this is not just in Iran, by the way. I would argue also in Lebanon, in Syria, Iraq. Soleimani is held in very high regard, right? I mean, this propaganda, this garbage that comes out of Mike Pompeo's mouth or Donald Trump, that he's a terrorist. They're the terrorists. Soleimani's just helping countries defend themselves from Israeli, from Zionist colonizers, from American imperialism. What on earth are these troops even doing in this region to begin with? You can't go invading someone and their backyard and then say that I mean, backyard is putting it mildly, right? Like Iran has borders with Iraq and Afghanistan, both countries destroyed, right? So Iran has every incentive, also as a principle of the revolution, with helping Palestinians to get rid of the Zionist colonizers. Every right to defend themselves and help countries next door defend themselves, right? So the only terrorists here are Trump and Pompeo, and the fact that the Nicaraguan president, he's holding a minute of silence for Soleimani. Wow, I can tell you this resonates really, really loudly, and very well with Iranians and with the president. This doesn't go unnoticed. It's extremely powerful as a political statement. Really. And it's not meant just as politics. They mean this, because again, Nicaragua is a country that's for decades, right? They've been, feeling the full brunt of American imperialism in Latin and Central America. They know very well what it is, very, very well. Here you saw also Iran and Venezuela signing a memorandum of understanding to expand cooperation in petrochemicals with a view to carrying out joint projects, okay, and building on their already close cooperation in oil. And they also signed a dozen other cooperation deals. This is also very, very important. Venezuela, remember, used to be a big supplier of oil to the United States, and then they slowly started sanctioning it more and more. They tried to, coup Maduro, and they hated Chavez, and all sorts of smear campaigns and economic terrorism against Venezuela. So in the end, even though Venezuela has so much crude oil, the largest reserves on Earth of oil. I wonder why the Americans don't like the leadership there. You ended up with a situation where Iran was sending ships of fuel, right? So it's refined fuel all the way across the ocean to Venezuela to help them get through the sanctions, right? So because the sanctions had decimated Venezuela's ability to refine their own oil. So, you already had cooperation between Iran and Venezuela of trying to break through, break free from the sanctions. But this is taking it to a next level. And like I said, Nicaragua, Cuba, all of them also have felt the full force of U.S. sanctions. Let me show you here. This is Maduro. Man, I gotta say, he looks like Saddam Hussein. He just it's funny because if this guy, you could drop him in any street in Lebanon or Syria and he would just fit right in. He would blend right in with the rest of the crowd, right? Like it's true, right? It's true. He looks like someone from the Levant or the Middle East. Yeah. So anyway, I'll play his speech, right? This is what he said.
El expresidente de los Estados Unidos, Donald Trump, declaró su crimen, un crimen de lesa humanidad contra el pueblo de Venezuela.
Yep.
Declaró que el objetivo de su gobierno y de la agresión y las sanciones contra Venezuela era hacer colapsar la sociedad venezolana para que el poder imperialista de Estados Unidos se apoderara del petróleo venezolano, se apoderara de las riquezas de Venezuela. Diría un buen abogado, a confesión de partes, relevo de prueba. Trump ha declarado su culpabilidad en crímenes de lesa humanidad contra el noble y pacífico pueblo de Venezuela.
Yeah. I mean, I was just talking about Donald Trump and this Espionage Act indictment and obstruction of justice. I mean, you if you're looking for a real crime, committed by Donald Trump, here's one right there. But of course, people in Washington would do the same thing. That's why Joe Biden hasn't lifted any of these sanctions, because they're two birds of a feather, right? They're two birds of a feather. So, let me show you the American response, because they are really, really not happy about this visit.
President of Iran is visiting this week Venezuela and Nicaragua for cooperation agreements. And so what opinion you have of this trip, and what's your message for those Latin American countries who engage with the Iranian regime?
So I would say in general, we've been quite clear in this briefing about our concerns about Iran's activities. And I don't think it's necessarily surprising that those two countries that you mentioned are engaging further diplomatically with them. And I think I'll leave it at that.
Oh man, what a lame non-response. It is a response though, right? So that was the State Department. Yeah. He's not surprised. Yeah, you bet. You're definitely surprised. I can tell you that. They're not happy whatsoever.
Iran, I'm sure you know the president of Iran is doing a tour of Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua. Just your reaction, your thought on, what he can achieve there and how the U.S. might be countering whatever he's trying to achieve there. And then also...
I'm sorry, who is traveling?
The president of Iran.
He pretended like he doesn't know that is. I'm sorry, who's traveling? Like as if you don't know. As if you don't know, man.
And then just on the report that China supplied some drone ingredients to Iran to be sent to Russia. Is there any veracity to that report? Is that true? And if so, what can...
I cannot confirm that reporting. And as for the president's visit to Central America, they can speak for their travel habits and their agenda. We don't ask countries in this hemisphere or any other to choose who they're going to associate with or who they're going to talk to or who they're going to allow to visit.
In this hemisphere or any other. What is he trying to pretend he's John Wayne?
Talk to or who they're going to allow to visit. That's for them to speak to. We're focused on our own national security interests.
Well, thank you. How generous of you. Thank you. Right? How benevolent. We're so glad that you allow other countries to do as they will.
Security interest in the region.
Thank you.
I mean, look, I can't speak to the agenda or what he's doing or what he's going to meet with. Are we concerned about Iran's destabilizing behavior? You bet we are, and we have and will continue to take steps to mitigate that behavior.
Destabilizing behavior. I mean, again, this is so funny to me because, the guy, they're just visiting, right? So they're Raisi and his delegation, they're just visiting. They're trying to survive and keep their countries afloat. And for them, this is destabilizing behavior. I suppose so, right? Like, if you're trying to suck Venezuela's wealth and you're trying to, put your boot on Nicaragua's neck and blockade Cuba for 60 years, and you murder Soleimani and try to literally really destabilize Iran to turn it back into what it was before. So for many years it was a CIA MI6 puppet state, right? The Shah giving all of his oil to us and buying our weapons and so on. Very nice arrangement, right? So yes, I suppose in that regard, countering this kind of behavior would make Raisi, or Iran, a destabilizing catalyst or component in the region. But to anyone with a shred of sanity and understanding, it's quite to the contrary. What's destabilizing is attacking these countries just because you don't like the fact that they have a lot of resources. Remember, Iran. If you look at which countries have the largest reserves of proven reserves of natural gas, number 1 is Russia and number 2 is Iran. That is huge. That is huge. Look at oil. Like I told you, Venezuela, number 1 in proven reserves of crude oil. They want to get their hands on this stuff so bad, so bad, right? And talking about hemispheres, this goes back to the thinking in the imperialist thinking, the Monroe Doctrine, which is that the United States should interfere in countries that are in its hemisphere. So in their eyes, Venezuela is their backyard, Cuba is their backyard. Okay, so it's okay for the United States to quote unquote secure and defend itself by intervening in Nicaragua and Venezuela, because that's the Western Hemisphere. But it's not okay for Iran to help Syria, to help Yemen, to help Iraq, to help its neighbors, in its backyard, to fight Zionist and Western imperialism. That's not okay. For that, have to murder Soleimani. I see. You can't reason with foreign policy like this, because this goes back, every administration for a century. They have this thinking that they are the kings, and they get to police the world. And let me show you this clip on Telesur. I was very happy to see my good friend Professor Marendi accompanying the delegation, and he was talking to them from Cuba. So I was very happy to see him there. Let me play this.
I think the fact that Iran, Cuba, Venezuela, Nicaragua, all of these are countries that have resisted imperialism, that have maintained their independence despite sanctions, brutal sanctions. This has created an affinity, a comradeship, brotherhood or sisterhood between these different countries, and these are being expanded. So ironically, what the West has done is that by sanctioning all of us, they've brought us closer to one another, and I think that is something that needs to be expanded. The closer Iran and Cuba, Iran, Venezuela, and Iran and Nicaragua come together, the more countries from Latin America can expand cooperation across West Asia, and countries like Iran can expand cooperation.
See, that's the thing. That is the underlying point. And by the way, in this case, we're talking about Iran and Nicaragua, Venezuela, Cuba, but this logic and this fact applies to the entire global South. The United States and Europe, by sanctioning countries, they thought that they can isolate these countries. But the problem is they've sanctioned so many of them, right, that now they have become the majority. And remember, the global South have always been the majority. You have a minority of people in Europe who have colonies, who control the resources and enslave and subjugate the people of the global South, right? So this is in the Cold War thinking. You would talk about third world or non-aligned, but when we say global South, we're talking about everything that is not Northern America, Europe, Australia, New Zealand, and so on, right? So the majority of the planet's population. And guess what? Now you have things like the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the SCO. You have things like BRICS Plus. Everyone wants to join. Argentina, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Syria. The countries that actually have resources and produce things and don't just print money that is, based on nothing, that has no backing whatsoever in reality. Now all of these countries are coming together. So now you see in this segment, Iran and Latin American countries. And already, remember, Iran was sending ships of fuel to help Venezuela in exchange for gold. And what was the response in Britain? The response was, so Venezuela are able to pay with gold? We have to take their gold. And now you have $1 billion of gold that belongs to Venezuela that is being held hostage in the Bank of England, right? Because apparently, it's not clear who the government of Venezuela is. What do you mean it's not clear? It's that guy called Maduro, who I just showed you, right? He's the president. Who disputes this except a bunch of lunatics in Whitehall and Foggy Bottom? Christ, what a name. That's where you have the State Department. Anyway, so you have a coming together of China, of Russia, of Iran, of the global South in multiple forms, SCO, BRICS, and Belt and Road Initiative or New Silk Road. And this new world is called the multipolar world, because it's no longer based on one hegemon. It's no longer the United States policing the world, deciding for the world, manipulating its currency to control other countries and their resources. It's game over. You can't reverse this anymore. It's irreversible. All right? It's irreversible. It's already happening. And the war in Ukraine is really the catalyst, I would say, because this was going to happen anyway. And you know, the other catalyst is what? Is this neocolonialism, right? The idea that the EU and the United States should police the world and sanction them and brutalize them. But guess what? It's backfired. That has backfired. And the Ukraine war has only sped up this process of multipolar world emerging. And this is the manifestation of that. This is why the president of Iran is visiting Venezuela and Cuba and Nicaragua and signing agreements with them to increase bilateral trade and cooperation. You can't change that. Sorry. It's happening. It's happening whether you like it or not. I have a couple of other things to go through with you guys. This is so. Hold on. Let me pull this up. So apparently, you know, when I heard the story, I really thought it was a joke at first. Apparently, you had a Ryanair flight that was approaching Tel Aviv, and the flight attendant, took the microphone and said, you know, to the entire to all the passengers that we are approaching Palestine, right? Not Israel, not Israel, Palestine, and they are so angry about this. They're so angry about this, right? So I just want to show you this from World Israel News. Okay, look at how they describe this. So they said that Israelis present on the flight told Channel 14 News that a flight attendant had said they were bound for Palestine multiple times in both English and Italian. She was like, I'm really going to double down and drive this point home in two languages, that this is Palestine. So this is about an hour before it's supposed to touch down in Ben Gurion Airport, right? And some of the passengers spoke up about some of the passengers on the flight spoke up about the announcement and asked the attendant to either correct herself or apologize. And one passenger said, quote, "We didn't buy tickets on the airline to deal with anti-Zionist opinions from flight staff. All we wanted was an announcement that Tel Aviv is in Israel." I'm sorry, man. Somebody maybe forgot to tell you that Ryanair is Irish, and the Irish are not stupid. And you're barking up the wrong tree, man. Sorry. So the flight attendant who made the announcement was not wearing a name tag, making it impossible to identify anyone by name in order to file a complaint at a later time. And then one person who tried taking a picture of the attendant was told that she will be arrested upon landing if she left her seat in order to get a clear image of the speaker. Ryanair, which is headquartered in Dublin, in Ireland, refused to respond to multiple requests for comment from Channel 14 regarding the incident. Yeah, like I said, you know, the Irish, they know colonialism when they see it, and they see it. Also, I highlighted this phrase here. This is the Ireland-Israel alliance. What is that, like 10 people? Where do you even make this thing up, man? So you have here Simon Wiesenthal Center, who sent a letter even to Ryanair to complain. And, you know, I'm really confused, because I know Simon Wiesenthal Center is like, you know, it's a very famous organization where, you know, they'll get, for example, Holocaust survivors to talk about their experiences. You know, if any of you know Hogan's Heroes, Le Beau, who was the little French guy, you know, he lived through the Holocaust, and the Nazis killed his family, and he was in a camp, in a concentration camp, and so I know that he spoke there. For example, you should go watch it. Really horrible stuff, right? But now, for example, for some reason, Simon Wiesenthal Center, you know, the impression that I got, you know, is that in recent years, unfortunately, it's become more of a tool of Zionists, right? So, it's like they use and weaponize the Holocaust in order to attack anyone who's like pro-Palestine or anti-Zionist and try to like silence them, right? So here they're writing a letter and saying that they've received numerous complaints on this flight from Italy to Tel Aviv, where once again the flight attendant said both in English and Italian that the plane will be landing in Palestine instead of its correct location, the state of Israel. And the correction was refused. So when I see this corroborates the fact that this actually happened. I don't think Simon Wiesenthal Center would even bother sending this if it weren't true, right? So let me just say something, because you got people like that quote I read where this guy is saying, one of the passengers saying, we don't want like these politicized opinions where someone is saying Palestine instead of Israel. Well, saying Israel is political, because Zionism is political, whether you like it or not. It's nothing but politics. It's you got a bunch of religious extremists hijacking an entire religion, Judaism, and trying to use it for political gains, for building a country on occupied, on somebody else's land and occupying it. And of course, this is something that was helped by, kickstarted by Britain. You had Balfour Declaration in 1917, and then you had the United States bankrolling Israel. Israel receives more military aid than any other country. Now it's Ukraine this year, but usually it's not. So this is Western European colonialism. Period. And forcing people to say that it's Israel. It's not Israel. It's occupied Palestine. The funny thing is that many people. Many Israeli prime ministers, or those of them who were born, in occupied Palestine, because you had, when Zionism emerged, you had this wave of mass emigration to colonize the place, right? And back then it was a British mandate. So you had, wasn't it Golda Meir, right? That's the only female Israeli prime minister. She said herself, I was born in Palestine. That's what it says. It says Palestine on the birth certificate, on the documents. So, even the Zionists of that time, they knew that this is Palestine. It's never been called anything else. It's so weird that they try to change the name, even though some of the most prominent Zionists and as I said, prime ministers were born in occupied Palestine. You have to consider that the British were occupying it then, so it was still occupied Palestine. Golda Meir, she said that she's a Palestinian. Yeah, guess what? 'Cause she's born in Palestine. But that doesn't make her indigenous, just because George Washington, is born in what used to be the colonies, doesn't mean that he's indigenous to America. He's still a European, and same thing with the Israelis. There's a very clear intent to colonize the place. So in any case, I just wanted to talk about this because it's so funny how offended they get, Yeah, guess what? When you call that Israel, you offend most people on the planet, because most people on the planet, they know what Israel is. They know that this is just an occupation, period. That's it. And you're barking up the wrong tree. The Irish, they suffered under centuries of British colonialism, and Israel is one of Britain's colonies. So you're not going to get any sympathies from the Irish. Again, you're barking up the wrong tree. Sorry. It's like the Israelis, they're not used to getting, to being held accountable or being told to their faces. And that's why when the World Cup in Qatar was taking place, you had some Israeli journalists traveling there. They couldn't speak to a single person every single time. They would be asking soccer fans, or I can't believe I said soccer, football fans to speak. Most of the viewers are Americans, so I had to say soccer, but no one wanted to speak to them. And I put together a whole thread of videos, and they put it in Newsweek magazine and a whole bunch of other things online. They put my whole thread there. You had Japanese football fans, Arab football fans, European football fans. No one wanted to speak to the Israeli channels because they don't support what Israel's doing, and they don't support Israeli colonialism. Period. I mean, sorry that you've been confronted with reality, but actually I'm not sorry. You know, I find Israel is offensive. You offend you know, my senses and my intelligence, and you offend Palestinians' dignity with Israel. Yeah? How about that? You're offensive. Literally offensive and aggressive in every sense of the term. That's what Israel is. How about that? Speaking of the Palestinians, right? Let me show you this. So the Palestinian president went to China, right? So this was an official state visit. He's the first Arab leader this year to be received on an official visit in China, and they rolled out the red carpet and the works, right? So this is Mahmoud Abbas. Take a look at this video, yeah? Hold on, give me a second. This is the Chinese President Xi Jinping speaking.
欢迎阿巴斯总统先生再次访华。你是今年中方接待的首位阿拉伯国家元首，也充分体现了中巴关系的高水平。中巴两国相互信任，彼此支持，我们是好朋友、好伙伴。面对世界百年变局和中东地区的局势新变化，中方愿同巴方加强协调和合作，推动巴勒斯坦问题早日得到全面、公正、持久解决。今天我们将共同宣布中巴建立战略伙伴关系，这将成为两国关系史上继往开来的重要里程碑。中方愿以此为契机，同巴方全面推进各领域的友好合作。
فخامة الرئيس شي جين بينغ أتوجه إليكم في بداية زيارتي هذه إلى بلدكم الصديق متمنيا لفخامتكم التوفيق في تحقيق طموحات وتطلعات الشعب الصيني الصديق نحو مزيد من التطور والازدهار، وأنتهز الفرصة لأتقدم لكم بجزيل الشكر على كل ما تقدمه الصين من إسناد لحقوق الشعب الفلسطيني ونصرة قضيته العادلة. أن دولة فلسطين التي تؤمن بعدالة موقفكم ستواصل وقوفها بثبات إلى جانب الصين.
国家主席习近平14号下午在人民大会堂北大厅举行仪式，欢迎巴勒斯坦国总统马哈茂德·阿巴。
That's a dope theme. I like that very much. Bring out the trumpets again. Let's go.
巴斯对我国进行国事访问。天安门广场上鸣礼炮21响。
Yo, wow. You know, when I said they rolled out the red carpet, I meant it literally. Look at this treatment. Beautiful, right? You love to see it. But you know, I have to say one thing. The Chinese president should have known that it is not called Palestine, it is called the State of Israel. And because he said Palestine, he is therefore an anti-Semite. So, you know, this is important, right? Because on the world stage, right, like Palestine is not even a full member state in the UN. They only have observer status, which is disgraceful. You know, I mean, this whole partition plan, I could sit here for hours, and I have sat here for hours and talked about how outrageous all of this is. But my point here is that on the global stage, you know, China, with the Belt and Road Initiative, with this multipolar world that is forming, once again, you see another manifestation of this, right? You might think this is not a big deal, or it's like some kind of formal, you know, regular visit. No. This is a very big deal. Once again, you are seeing things happen on the world stage, like Xi Jinping said, that you have not seen for a century. This is another manifestation of that. The Chinese are calling for Palestine to become a full member of the United Nations. So Xi Jinping said China supports Palestine in becoming a full member state of the United Nations. And remember, China was a founding member and has a permanent seat on the UN Security Council, right? So you have 5 permanent members: France, UK, US, China, and Russia, the victors of World War II. And they have veto power. And there was a vote a few years ago. Unfortunately, Palestine didn't accede, to full member status. But we all know why. I often say, and please feel free to quote me, that Israel has 3 seats on the UN Security Council, right? The UK, US, and France. Russia sometimes no, right? Russia was actually, the Soviet Union was the first country to recognize Israel. But once again, I will get into that in a second. Let me show you what Palestinians being interviewed said about this visit.
Honor that our president is going to visit a great country like China, and we hope that it will result in support for the Palestinian people and the alleviation of the great suffering facing the Palestinian people.
China is one of the most important countries that has always stood by the Palestinian people and supported their legitimate rights, and this visit by our president comes as thanks to this country that is friendly to our people.
The Palestinian people are happy about our president's visit to China, and this is an opportunity for our president to thank China and its people on our behalf. We hope that this visit will achieve political progress for Palestine at the international level.
The guy was so Arab. He said, no. I couldn't hear what he was saying. Oh, this is funny, man. Look, here's another thing. You have a China-funded school in Palestine, okay? So
school for male students in Ain Mesbah town in Ramallah in 2021. Ain Mesbah, one of the most densely populated towns, had no school for males, forcing them to walk for tens of kilometers to reach the nearest school in the neighboring town.
مباني كثير رائعة، بالإضافة إنه في عنا موجود تجهيزات علمية من مختبرات كمبيوتر ومختبرات علوم، في عنا.
How dare the Chinese do that? How dare they fund a school in Palestine? They're so imperialist, right? They're trying to hoodwink the Palestinians, right? This is I'm making fun of this garbage propaganda that somehow European countries are having colonized Africa and destroyed it and robbed it blind. They are not evil, and they are the representatives of human rights and everything that is good. But China helping build infrastructure in Africa and in Palestine is evil, definitely evil, and they're trying to debt trap African countries. Jesus, you got to have some nerve to come up with something like that. You really do. You really have to have some nerve. So this is why, for example, look at the Germans, what they're doing, right, with their reports, their internal reports, saying that China is a threat, a security threat, and trying to quote in various ways to remold the existing rules-based international order. What does that even mean? Rules-based international order? Jesus Christ, what a mouthful! Go to hell. Just say you see how they never say international law? As if they even care about international law. They don't. So they put this term and they make you think that they're talking about that. For them, a rules-based international order is that, like, we the Europeans sit on top and screw everybody else. You're at the bottom. You sit under us. So again, according to the Germans, right, and their security assessment, China is a threat, and China is asserting a regionally dominant position with ever more vigor, acting time and again counter to our interests and values. Really? What values are those? Killing off millions in East Africa? Which values? In West Africa, rather. This is typical language that you would see from a document in the United States or the UK. Copy paste. It's the same anti-Chinese language and racism against China. Even if you think that it's not racism, I really don't care what you call it. It's aggressive And it's this air of superiority, like, we are civilized in Europe, we have human rights, we are the best, and the Chinese are trying to disturb all of this. They're troublemakers. No, they're not. No, they're not. We just don't like that China is going to be the #1 world economy, that China has built and is helping build an alternative to Western-based hegemony. That's what it's about. Okay, and so this visit with the Palestinian president. Keep in mind that when you say Palestinian president, I mean you have the West Bank in Palestine, and then you have Gaza. This is basically what they wanted in the partition plan. That you have like two chunks that are physically separate, but apparently one country. In any case, you have different ruling powers or factions in each one, right? So in the West Bank, you will have Fatah, you will have the PLO, and in Gaza, you will have Hamas. But in any case, this is the issue of the PLO and their cooperation with Israel and the Oslo Accords and all this. We've sat here for hours and talked about that. I wanted to speak about on the international level what's happening, and I guarantee you the Israelis are very upset at this. No doubt whatsoever. Here, let me continue, since I'm talking about yeah, so one second. Okay. Right, so this is sort of a multifaceted topic. I wanted to kind of mold and bring all of them together. So what the Russians are doing now is they're going to build a branch of their embassy in Israel in Jerusalem, right? So this is according to the Jerusalem Post. The Russians are going to open a new branch in Jerusalem in exchange for acknowledging the boundaries of Moscow's historic and present ownership of the plot of land on which the office will be built. Okay, so basically the Russians were having an issue with Israel acknowledging that this plot of land belongs to the Russians, right? And they had to go get the documents from their archives, in some place in Moscow, they said that the branch office of the consular section of the Russian embassy in Israel, as the embassy calls it, will be opened on the corner of King George and Ma'alot streets in downtown Jerusalem, where a parking lot is currently located, after Russia and the Jerusalem municipality, in cooperation with the Foreign Ministry, signed an agreement clarifying the boundaries of the plot. Okay, so this will include a residence for Russian diplomats and a conference hall, which makes it more than a regular consulate. So why is this important? Well, you guys remember that there are Jerusalem originally what was intended to be corpus separatum. So in Latin, this means a separate body, and it implies that it doesn't belong to anyone. It's because it's a holy city for Jews, Christians, Muslims, that it has such religious importance. It cannot be given to any one country, right? So it must be its own entity, right? Obviously, that never happened because the Israelis illegally annexed all of it, right? And any hopes of East Jerusalem, at the very least, the east of Jerusalem becoming the capital of Palestine, was also, robbed, because the Israelis took all of it, and then they passed this Jerusalem law in 1980 and 1981, basically, allowing themselves, bestowing upon themselves the right, the benevolent right to take possession of everything in Jerusalem, because Israel is the Jewish state and blah blah blah, and God's said so in the Bible, that they ignore the part about not killing people, apparently, right? Like 10 Commandments, they don't like to to reference that. But in any case, the UN came out and said you're not allowed to have Jerusalem. Any law that you pass is null and void. Get out of Jerusalem, get out of the Syrian Golan Heights. And, the United States accepted this. So when Donald Trump, moved the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem, it was very shocking, because he was violating multiple UN Security Council resolutions. He was violating the initial idea of having Jerusalem as a separate body, and he was legitimizing and validating the Israeli annexation, right? Right now, everyone talks about Russia illegally annexing. Well, no one really seems to care when Israel illegally annexes and does it on a much larger scale and worse scale, right? So that's why it's kind of shocking to see the Russians now build a branch of the embassy in Jerusalem. And, you can look at it multiple ways. I mean, I think it's scandalous, honestly. I'm not going to sit here and trash Donald Trump for doing that and then give the Russians a pass. I'm not giving anyone a pass. There are 4 other countries. Most of them are Central American or Latin American. They also moved their embassies. I think Honduras is one of them, and perhaps Guatemala, but don't quote me on that. Regardless, the United States, moved its embassy there, and Biden keeps it, of course. And then Trump also thought that he has the power in his deluded mind to declare that the Syrian Golan Heights, which are occupied and also annexed by Israel, are part of Israel. Okay. Well, now I'm not going to give the Russians a pass. You could argue, though, that this is good for the Russians because they get to put another spying center there. Of course they do. It's not fair to say all, but let's say among big powers, definitely, absolutely, a lot of their embassies are spy stations, right? So it's just the way it is, because it's considered their own. I know. In this case, the Russians bought the land. You don't necessarily have to buy the plot of land. When you have an embassy or a diplomatic mission in another country, you don't necessarily have to buy the building, right? You could lease it, or rather rent it, and so on. But in this case, maybe the Israelis kind of cornered the Russians and said, "Fine, we will agree and accept your legal claim to the plot of land, on the condition that you make part of your embassy here." Why would the Israelis do this? And again, I'm speculating. The Israelis might do this because it helps legitimize their illegal annexation of Jerusalem, right? Their theft of Jerusalem. Although I honestly, I know people attach a lot of importance to it because of its religious significance, to Christians, to Jews, to Muslims. You have the Aqsa Mosque there and so on. Me personally, I think all of Palestine is the issue, right? It's not because they took Jerusalem. It's the whole place, right? They really kind of they stole everything, all of it. But you know what I mean. Now, again, if the I know this is just a section of the Russian embassy. It's a branch. That's how they're framing it. Like, they're not moving the embassy, but this is good for the Israelis because they don't give a crap about a plot of land. It's good for them because it makes their annexation of Jerusalem look valid, and obviously we have to condemn that because everyone's so busy condemning the Russians for Ukraine, well, they forgot to condemn the Israelis for Palestine and Syria and so on. In any case, let me show you another piece of news. The Saudis are signaling, in case it wasn't obvious enough, they're really giving the finger now to this idea that there's going to be normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel. Like, it's over, right? When the Chinese mediated this peace deal between Iran and Saudi Arabia about 2 months ago, that was very clear. From that moment, it was very clear that they're not interested in normalization with Israel, because once again, Trump, when he was doing his whole Abraham Accords and moving the embassy, he got Bahrain and he got the UAE to sign these accords and normalize ties with Israel, even though most people in Bahrain are disgusted by the prospect. And then it was highly speculated that Saudi Arabia would be next. And so now all of a sudden, instead of normalizing with Israel, Saudi Arabia is normalizing with Iran, and with Syria and with Yemen. I mean, what's going on here? Because Israel tried to convince Saudi Arabia that Iran is their common enemy, right? Oh my God, Iran is spreading, Shia sectarianism, and Iran is a threat to the region. They are competing for power with you, etc., right? So that was what the Israelis wanted, and then they wanted Saudi Arabia to normalize ties, and now the Saudis, right? So on top of the peace accords with Iran, a Saudi embassy spokesperson in Washington said that Riyadh's position on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict has been clear and has been consistent for many years. In other words, my job is to translate politics for you. He's saying go to hell. There's no normalization. And he continues to say here that, in fact, it was the late King Abdullah who way back in 2002 introduced what is now known as the Arab Peace Initiative at the Arab League Summit in Beirut that year. And the proposal, the initiative, does offer Israel normalization with all members of the Arab states in return for a just and comprehensive peace with the Palestinians based on a two-state solution. Okay? So he said that normalization, or rather the offer, really still remains on the table, but that the issue of Palestinian rights must be solved before normalization with Israel can move forward. And then, of course, Blinken, down below the poodle, saying that real national security interest to have normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia. I'm sure it is. Well, in any case, this peace proposal that goes back to 2002, yes, it's true. The Arab League, well, sort of. I mean, half of them didn't show up, but there was this idea that if the Israeli, I think it was an attempt to call the Israelis bluff, okay? Because it says in the initiative that all the Arab countries will normalize ties with Israel if they give Palestinians their state. Again, it's like this ridiculous notion. They have to beg the Israelis to give them one. But in any case, this was an attempt to call their bluff. And what happened? The Israelis didn't budge, right? So there's you have all the Arab states, and remember, they're not happy with this. Syria especially was saying, like, what the hell? We are not normalizing ties with Israel or recognizing Israel. This is far too generous, and we support the Palestinians' right to armed struggle. That's it, and that's always been the Syrian position. But in any case, even with this peace initiative, this proposal on the table, to this day, the Israelis refuse to accept it, refuse to help the Palestinians, refuse to stop, committing crimes of aggression against the Palestinians. They refuse to leave the Golan Heights because we know they're never going to do that. We know they're never going to leave Palestine. They're never going to leave the West Bank alone. They're never going to leave East Jerusalem or go back to the 1967 borders, which are mentioned in there. We know that. And so that's why this called their bluff. It shows you that no matter how generous and forthcoming you try to be with the Israelis, no matter what diplomatic resolution you put on the table, Israel does not care. Israel will not Israel will not abandon the illegally annexed territories that it took. Doesn't care. You cannot reason with the Israelis. Unfortunately, that is the reality that we are presented with. It's a British colony. It's a European colony. I mean, what do you expect? What do you expect, really? Let me show you this clip of Netanyahu struggling. I mean, it's so funny, really. Just take a look.
Figures show that over 7,000 settlement homes have been advanced under your government since the start of the year. And these are widely criticised internationally, publicly and privately to you. They contravene international law. You have said in interviews I've seen in the past that it's the Palestinians that are the obstacle to peace. As the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, said this week, it's settlements that are the physical obstacle to peace.
I think that's not true, and it's not new that I disagree with this. I also disagree that it's against international law because there's never been an international decision that says that Jews cannot live in Judea. That's where we come from.
No, but Article 49 of the Geneva Convention says that an occupying force cannot build on the land.
No, it cannot transfer people.
And build on the land.
transfer people, build on the land. If it's your
Unless it's military.
if it's disputed territory, which it is, you call it occupied, we call it disputed. It's part of our ancestral homeland. I mean, we've only been attached to it for, 3,000 years. King David established our capital here in Jerusalem.
Dude, you're from Eastern Europe. Jesus, I've never seen someone so delusional. I mean, look, like this is like if I went to I knocked on someone's door in France and I told them, my ancestor invaded with William the Conqueror. He left Normandy and invaded England, and that's where the Medhurst family and name come from. And so if I go like 1,000 years ago, this was my house. So you need to leave right now, or I'm gonna kill you. Fucking like lunacy, the psychotic religious extremism in this guy's eyes. Like, how can you even utter this? This guy's supposedly a head of state. Say, oh, I've been here 3,000 years ago. How do you even know where your family was 500 years ago? Never mind 3,000. Deluded. He's a lunatic. Again, I take that back. This is unfair to lunatics. This guy's something else. Christ. And he's trying to like argue about the Geneva Convention. It's like, well, it's disputed. It's not occupied. What?
Only 3,000 years ago. We're not the Belgians in the Congo or the Dutch in Indonesia.
Oh, Jesus Christ, man. Jesus, you absolutely are the Belgians in the Congo. That's what you don't understand. Everyone can see this. Everyone on planet Earth can see that Israel is brutalizing the Palestinians in very, very similar ways, almost exactly just like the Belgians in the Congo, perhaps on lesser numbers. It's the principle, right? You are the Belgians in the Congo. You are exactly, quite literally, a product of British imperialism, right? Balfour Declaration, 1917. We want to create a Jewish state in Palestine. It was a British mandate, a British colony handed over in 1948 to the Israeli militias, right? To the Zionist paramilitary groups. You are literally a product of British imperialism. That's what Israel is. It's a thorn in the side of the Arabs, right in the middle of the Arab world, between Morocco and Saudi Arabia. Right in the middle, to splinter the Arab world, to keep them in combat and in dispute and destabilize them for decades and decades. Has that not manifested? Is that not what happened? What is that? This guy's a lunatic. Like who is his housing agent? God, right? That's what he's saying, right? You remember his ambassador to the United Nations, Danny Dunnan, the Israeli ambassador to the UN. I showed this video where he's showing up to the UN General Assembly in New York with a Bible in his hand. If he were outside on the street, people would laugh at him like you're some kind of religious lunatic. That's what Zionism is. Unfortunately, it's very political and not religious whatsoever. I mean, like they just it's like ISIS. They hijack Islam and use that as like they try to frame it as like, well, it's a religious thing. God gave us the right to behave like this, or the Crusaders, right? Like God sent us to massacre everyone in Jerusalem, including the Christians, by the way, and we have to liberate the Holy Land, right? We have to liberate it of every other human being, right? Yeah, very, very religious of you.
God's sake, this is the land of Israel. It's our country. So I completely...
It's his country, man. It's his country. God gave it to him like 3,000 years ago. He was there, right? Jesus, he's like those elves, right, in Lord of the Rings. Like, I was there 5,000 years ago when Isildur was...
agree with that. But I think one thing is true. The Palestinians are here, and we're not going to push them out. We're here.
That's actually a lie. You're literally killing one Palestinian a day. Calculate it yourself, right? We are in June. Every single day this year, they've been killing a Palestinian, one per day. And the Israelis also had a secret plan to ship Palestinians to Latin America, right? Which is ethnic cleansing, right? And they literally wiped out so many villages, so many Palestinian villages, right? This was in 1947 and 1948 when they knew the English are going to leave, right? Well, sort of. And then we will take it. And they wiped out Palestinian villages eradicated them completely. You had hundreds of thousands of people that fled in the Nakba. Israel has done nothing but push Palestinians out. So many of them, refugees, in their own country or next door in Syria, Lebanon, in Jordan. Yeah.
Here, and they're not going to push us out. But that's not the reason.
No, they will push you out, and they should, because you are European and you're masquerading as some kind of indigenous person. You can look, if your grandfather or your father comes from some European country, you can get nationality. You have a choice. You have a choice. Palestinians don't have a choice. Who's going to give them a passport? They don't even have one country. You got Israelis with like 2-3 passports, and Palestinians don't even have one. They get if they are able to even get travel visas to go somewhere, no one even knows what their travel documents are because they're refugees. The entitlement is something else, right? With with Israelis, really something else. The Congo, people in the Congo have every goddamn right on earth to push out people from Belgium. Algerians have every right to kick out the French from their land, and Palestinians have every right to kick out the Israeli Zionist European colonizers from their land. Same thing in Syria and the Golan Heights. Every right. It's in international law. It's not my opinion. If I cease to exist in the next 5 minutes, it would still be international law. It's not my opinion.
Successive governments, were unable to make peace. After all, they were here. They weren't building. They were freezing. There were, 4 or 5 prime ministers who were left of the Likud and left of me, before me and after me, couldn't make peace with the Palestinians. Why? Because the Palestinians, unfortunately, have been commandeered by a leadership that doesn't want peace with Israel. They want a peace without Israel.
Once again, this is a lie, and even if it were true, why should they accept, Israeli colonialism? Why are you like this is really crazy. Like he's saying that they are the aggressors and they don't want to make peace with us. Why should they make peace with you? You are on their land. You are European. Why are you trying to hide from this fact? I told you, go look up the list of Israeli prime ministers. Every single one of them is either born in Europe, or their parents were born in Europe, or their grandparents were born in Europe. So their whole thing, Zionism, is a movement, a political movement of going, mass emigrating to Palestine and taking it for themselves, right? Under this lunatic, lunatic idea that God gave them this land. What are you? You got a personal line, with God? Where does it say that? Who gave you the right? If someone doesn't believe in God, what do you tell them, right? This is crazy, and the fact that he can pass for a head of state is funny. I just read to you, by the way, we were just talking about this peace initiative in 2002, right? It's still on the table. The Saudis are saying right now, we will normalize with Israel if they respect the rights of the Palestinians and they follow the 2002 peace initiative. The Israelis don't care. Every time there's been some sort of they're at a crossroads and there's some hope of a political settlement or a diplomatic settlement, the Israelis always sabotage it. And let's look at the Oslo Accords. What did the Palestinians get from the Oslo Accords? We are 3 decades in the future now. What did they get? Palestine is still carved up. They carved it up into more pieces, like Zone A, B, C, right? Israelis are constantly raiding Jenin, raiding Nablus, raiding the West Bank. They're constantly bombing Gaza. What did the Palestinians get from these accords with the Israelis? Zero. Nothing whatsoever. Zero. You could even say they're worse off now than they were then. Because now they've outsourced the occupation to the PLO, to the Palestinian Authority. What did they get? So he's a complete liar. And again, even if the Palestinians don't want diplomacy, it's like, you saying that the Algerians should have sued for peace and made some diplomatic settlement with the French. Get out! Go home! Get out! What is this madness? You're supposed to, make peace. And no, they're not. No, you can make peace by going home. If you try to enter a country illegally, man, they will arrest you and deport you. You can't start going into somebody else's house, with a machine gun or with a rifle and subjugating them. What is this?
Next to Israel, they want a state instead of Israel. And that is the persistent Palestinian refusal to
like I said, it's their right.
Recognize a Jewish state in any border.
No. See, he tries to make this, they refuse to recognize it because it's a Jewish state. No, there's no problem with Jews. You got Arab Jews, Arab Christian, Arab this, Arab that. There's a million flavors of Arab. This has nothing to do with they refuse to recognize a Jewish state. No, they refuse to recognize an Israeli European colonizer state. I'm not going to play 2 more minutes of Netanyahu. I think my point is well taken, and I'm going to leave it at that. Let me tell you something else with Ukraine. Okay, let's talk about Ukraine and Israel. Okay, so this is funny. So the Israelis have decided to sell their tank, right, to 2 countries which they're not naming, right? So let me read this to you. This is from Yahoo. Okay, they say that in the Times of Israel, in this interview published, the Israeli government said that there are 2 potential countries with which we are holding advanced negotiations on a sale of the Mervaka tanks, right? That's the name of it. And they did not say which country it is, right? But they said that one of them is European. We'll take a guess. Which one do you think is in need of tanks right now in Europe? It's Ukraine, right? I mean, Ukraine is not really Europe, is it? But I guess in their view it is. It's Ukraine. Ukraine is going to get those tanks. And the other country is Azerbaijan. How do I know this? Because I've done videos about this, about the relationship between Israel and Azerbaijan. And you might be thinking, like, where the hell did you get Azerbaijan from? I'll tell you where I got Azerbaijan from. Azerbaijan is right next to Iran, right? They're next door neighbors. So more than half of Azerbaijan's weapons come from Israel. Think of that. The majority of their weapons, of their arsenal, come from Israel. That's their number one source of weapons. And then during the last visit of, I believe it was the Israeli president, right? Right after he left Azerbaijan, do you know what they did? They increased their military budget by $1 billion, right? And so now they're using that to buy these tanks. And Israel has agents and is operating out of Azerbaijan because they want to monitor Iran. They want to sabotage Iran. They want to run basically a base of operations out of Azerbaijan to wage war against Iran. Okay, and you've seen the various acts of sabotage. Blowing up nuclear sites and assassinating Iranian officials and so on, right? So they don't always work out of Azerbaijan, but it is one of their base of operations because of its proximity to Iran. So I have a very, very strong feeling and inclination that this is Ukraine and it is Azerbaijan. These are the 2 clients of the Merkava Israeli tank, right? And you'll have people try to sell you this idea that it's so revolutionary because actually the turret is is put backwards and the engine is in the front and they can fit a bunch of people in there. Yeah, well, let's take a look at how well this tank did in Lebanon, right, in 2006. Not too well, right? Not too well. Yeah, they end up as scrap metal in Lebanon. The Hezbollah were firing all sorts of ATGMs, these anti-tank guided missiles, and not just missiles but rockets at the Israeli tanks and making mincemeat out of them. That's why 2006 was so crazy, because the Israelis never expected that one of their ships is going to be taken out, right, by Hezbollah, and that their tanks are going to get decimated like that. They were not expecting this. So, the message here is that if the Ukrainians think that this is going to be their saving grace, I'm sorry, but, the Leopards and the Bradleys could barely do it. I was just going through the photos with you guys of how they made mincemeat. The Russians made mincemeat out of an entire tank column of Bradleys and Leopards, right? And this is due to various factors: mines, the mud, the Russian fortifications, the drones, etc. But this thing doesn't stand a chance. This thing does not stand a chance. I'm sorry. The best that Israel can do with this tank is harass United Nations peacekeepers who work in UNIFIL on the border, right? That's the best they can do. They harass armored personnel carriers, they harass UN officials, they harass the Lebanese army, and then of course they also do it with the Syrian border, right? Where UNDOF are based. So my parents worked in both of those peacekeeping missions. I'm very familiar with Israel's harassment tactics. And you can go look at a bunch of times where the Israelis, they killed UN peacekeepers, right? And then they always say, "Oh, it was an accident." That's a different issue though, because those were not done with tanks, to my knowledge. But this is the best that the Merkava can do: harass the UN. Yeah, that's all they're good for. I doubt it's going to do very well in combat. Sorry to say that. I want to show you this video. I could not believe my ears and my eyes when I saw this video. Really, I could not believe my eyes nor my ears when I saw this video. So let me just show you. This is the Czech president. Okay, the president of the Czech Republic. I mean, please listen.
I believe that as in the case of a number of war conflicts in the past, when there is an ongoing war, the security measures related to Russian nationals should be stricter than in normal times. So all Russians living in Western countries should be monitored much more than in the past, because they are citizens of a nation that leads an aggressive war. I think I can be sorry for these people, but at the same time, when we look back, when the Second World War started, all Japanese population living in the United States were under strict monitoring regime as well. That's simply cost of war.
When you say monitoring, what exactly do you mean by that?
I mean, being under the scrutiny of security services.
Wow. Yeah, a strict monitoring regime is not exactly what the Japanese were subjected to in World War II, right? And bear in mind, I have no sympathy whatsoever for the atrocities the Japanese army committed. But inside the United States, they had something called internment camps. So when World War II broke out, the United States, this is real, they actually did this. They took all the Japanese civilians or people of Japanese origin living in the United States. They're not soldiers, they're just civilians. They rounded them up and put them in camps, right? Internment camps. So he's saying that basically the Russians living in Europe should be rounded up and put in concentration camps, right? You can call them whatever you want. A strict monitoring regime, concentration camp, internment camp. It's all the same thing, really, because he starts out saying they should be monitored, which already, forget the camps, just this monitoring. What does that mean, monitoring? You're going to violate their civil liberties and their privacy. And what does that mean, monitoring? You're going to listen, you're going to bug their phones? You're going to spy on them? Why would these are civilians? Do you see how outrageous this is? This guy, I feel like sometimes the most vicious anti-Russian, racism it actually comes from the countries that are closest to Russia, right? From Ukraine, from Poland, from the Czech Republic, for all these countries that used to be basically satellite states of the Soviet Union. I mean, this is something else, really. Wow. because forget the camps. And he is saying the Japanese in World War II in the United States. It's very clear. This is the camps. It's the internment camps. There's no one is putting words in his mouth or misinterpreting what he said. He said that. He went there. He went there. He went all the way. And even if he hadn't made a mention of this, what does this mean? Strict monitoring regime under the scrutiny of the security services. Jesus Christ. And then, these people like him, they try to pretend that, they're civilized. Like, Russia is authoritarian. China is authoritarian. The Communist Party is going to spy on you. They're going to search your phone, and they're going to go through your social media accounts. And we would never do that in the West. We are so civilized in the West, We only censor things that we don't like because we care about the common good. We care about the greater good. We care about you, right? We would never ban news outlets that we don't like just because we don't like them. No. It's for your safety. We want to keep you safe from the Russians, right? We would never spy on you. We would never censor the press or violate your freedoms in any way. Freedom of expression, your right to privacy. No. This is only something that the barbaric Chinese and Russians do. We, the Europeans, we're so civilized. We, the Westerners, we're so civilized. We would never do this. Jesus Christ, this guy could not be clearer. He could not be more clear. He's saying violate their civil liberties and their right to privacy and put them in camps. I mean, I don't know what to say anymore. I really don't know what to say. This is on par with the other video I showed you where they were discussing on French television how to quote unquote de-Russify, right? They wanted to de-Russify Crimea. Like, if they had said Donbass, for example, you maybe there's some leverage there, right? Because the majority, you have lots of ethnic Russians, but they're not a majority. Crimea's always been Russian majority, always. Before they gave it to Ukraine in the 1950s, right? Because it was Russian. In case you didn't know that, Crimea was Russian until the 1950s, and then for some reason it was transferred to Ukraine, even though this was basically the same country, Soviet Union. And then, Russia took it back in 2014. Doesn't matter. The entire period, the entire time, always majority Russian. And they were trying to scare people with these red arrows, like the increase of Russians. Oh my God. It was so funny because even the starting figure in white, right? It was still over 50%. It was still Russian majority. Why are you trying to de-Russify a place that is literally occupied? Sorry, forgive me, occupied. Their shit is starting to it's starting to get in my goddamn ears. Why are you trying to de-Russify a place that has always been Russian majority? What is the point of that? Right? And they're saying like we gotta move the Russians because we are one of these like fucking experts with his spectacles, right? Pretending like he's some kind of a genius. Like, well, after World War II, it was normal that you had massive transfers of population. So there is a precedent for this. Like he's trying to justify ethnic cleansing. Ethnic cleansing. There are Russians who live here and have always lived here, and he wants to move them to another place. This guy's a lunatic, he's ethnic cleansing. Can you imagine if you said this about the Israelis? And in the Israelis' case, the Israelis are Europeans. They got no business being in Palestine. None. They got no business being there. You got Israelis walking around with 3 fucking passports, right? 3 citizenships. Palestinians can't even get one. They can't even get their own, right? Can you imagine if you couldn't dare speak like this on French TV or European TV or Western TV? About de-Zionizing Palestine, right? Like how to get rid of Zionism in Palestine, which is something that is Palestinians' right under the Geneva Convention, under the UN Charter. They have every right in the world to defend their homeland, just like people whine about Ukraine. So this guy from the Czech president, just going back to this, he said this and he went there. And I want you to remember this garbage when they tell you all the Russians this and that. Jesus Christ. You talk about, authoritarianism. Jesus. Here, I want to show you another post. Wargan was saying, this guy on Twitter was saying, naturally, Pavel's collaboration in the massacre of the Iraqi people was met with no sanction. Instead, he was promoted to the Czech presidency and now openly endorses concentration camps Eastern European fascism weaponized by the U.S. is a danger to humanity. Well, I mean, any fascism is danger to humanity, but yeah, you know, he's referring to the fact that, in case some of you don't know, you had Czech troops, Ukrainian troops in Iraq. Yeah, remember this garbage coalition of the willing, which, no, I'm sorry, nobody was willing to invade Iraq except a few lunatics who unfortunately hold the keys of power. But yeah, you had a bunch of European countries who invaded Iraq with the US, and I don't mean just the UK, I mean like Ukraine or like Czech, you know, Czech Republic. So, yeah, I mean, I understand the sentiment behind this post, because what he's saying is that, you know, you have people who really get off on this sort of thing of like, you know, putting people into camps, occupying them, etc. You know, whether it's in Iraq or whether it's Russian citizens civilians living in Europe. I mean, it's the same kind of sickness, you know. And I want to ask him something. How many Americans do you have living in the Czech Republic? I just quickly Googled this, and I found there are about 10,000 Americans, 10,000 U.S. citizens in the Czech Republic. So let me ask you something, Mr. Czech President, right? Are you going to put those Americans, these 10,000 Americans who live in your country, under a strict monitoring or security regime because the United States bombed Libya, invaded Syria, and has troops in Syria with bases stealing oil, or because the United States invaded Iraq and Afghanistan? Are you going to do anything? Will you monitor one U.S. citizen in the Czech Republic? Are you going to monitor British citizens like me, you know, because of doing the same crimes, committing the same crimes? What kind of logic is this? These people are mad. The answer to my question is obviously no. He will never even think of doing that, right? Because he would tuck his tail between his legs and run away like some goddamn street cat, like some you know, because he'd be too scared to do anything. He wouldn't even utter the beginning of this sentence if it referred to U.S. citizens or British citizens, right? But Russians, we can do anything with the Russians, right? We can put them in camps, right? Let's put them in camps because they're Russian. How dare they be Russian, right? You remember in Canada they were stopping a flight also because there were Russians on board, not Russian government officials, not Russian soldiers, just Russians. Two Russians who had the mathematical misfortune of just randomly being born Russian. How dare they be Russian? How dare they? Shame on them. Shame on them, right? Just so you know, here's the original poster in San Francisco in California, April 1st, 1942. Instructions to all persons of Japanese ancestry, right? This is when they started putting them in these camps. And today they apologize. Yeah, well, that's not good enough. That's not good enough. It's too little, too late. Maybe don't put people in camps in the first place. How about that? You know. You guys, thank you so much for all the donations. I'm gonna try and read them out to you now. We have one here from this is from F. Liu. Thank you very much for the sticker, and thank you to Winston for the sticker. I appreciate that. Kapapa, I'm glad to see you again. I can't read your name. I'm not even gonna try. Says, while operating Guantanamo Bay, America will say sanctions are tools for democracy to promote respect for human rights. That's the thing, man. The funny thing is that Cuba, they leased this, you know, Guantanamo Bay, this chunk of land to the Americans a long time ago. And the Americans refused to give it back despite violating the agreement. The agreement's long gone, you know, and they try to, this is how they escape their own laws, because they, like you said, they pretend to be, you know, advocates for democracy in this. And don't get me wrong, you know, the UN Charter and the you know, the American Constitution, these are wonderful documents on paper. aside from the fact that, of course, correct me if I'm wrong, the U.S. Constitution also says that someone black is like 3/5 of a man. Some weird racist crap again, right? But aside from that, yeah, these are beautiful things, right? The First Amendment, freedom of speech, Fourth Amendment, freedom from legal search and seizure. Yeah, but do they actually put them in practice? No. The UN also issues beautiful dictatives. Do they put them into practice? No. So, these are things that live in unfortunately, that live on paper and in fantasy, but they're not actually put into practice. Also, Arafat, I'm really happy that you mentioned this. One of you in the comments, this is Arafat Nekba, said Fort Minor Kenji. I wanted to mention this song. This is a song from Mike Shinoda from Linkin Park, and I think his grandparents, if I'm not mistaken, were put into internment camps for being Japanese, right? So he talks about that on this song, and it's very good. I think he interviewed his family and put excerpts of the interview in the song. So just in case you wanted to learn more about that topic. Anyway, I can barely keep up with all of this. Man, it's so crazy. So Dixon says, I agree the West are not the good ones, quote unquote, but since you said China is not evil, how do you rate their treatment of Uyghurs? Well, look, I don't understand why people in the West suddenly care about Muslims, It's not like the West butchered 1 million Iraqis and treats the Palestinians like crap, bankrolling Israel, tortures people in Guantanamo Bay just for being Muslim. What's the one thing that every single prisoner in Guantanamo Bay have in common? They're Muslim. That's it. That's the only criteria, right? And I interviewed one of them, Daifi, that's his name, and the interview's on the channel. Well, I'll also show you one more thing since you asked. Hold on, about Uyghurs. So the Arab League, right? The Arab League. Let me show you this over here. They visited China. Okay, this is from VOA. The Arab League visits China's Xinjiang region and rejects Uyghur genocide. Here you have Western countries have raised allegations of forced labor, religious persecution, and the United States says it's genocide. Well, what about the Arab League? Most Arabs are Muslim. Not all Arabs are Muslim. Like, I'm Arab Christian. But, let's see what the Arab League had to say. So members of the Arab League visited between May 30th and June 2nd, and they expressed their appreciation for China's efforts in Xinjiang and praised the region's development and stability. Okay? So Arab countries commended the care that Muslims in Xinjiang and people of other ethnic minority groups have received and expressed their firm support for China's effort to promote Xinjiang's development and ensure its stability. Anything further to say? Now, you might argue, well, this is not the Arab League saying this. This is the foreign ministry basically speaking for them. Okay, but fine. So the thing is, though, if the Chinese foreign ministry were lying, wouldn't Arab countries come out and say, "Hey, we went to Xinjiang and we didn't see, we don't agree with what the Chinese foreign ministry is saying. They're misquoting us." They didn't. This is the Chinese foreign ministry saying that the Arab League went to Xinjiang, they saw nothing wrong, and that's it. It's true, right? Here it says, what the Arab League delegation has seen with their own eyes once again shows that the truth always prevails, and those who seek to smear China by manipulating Xinjiang-related issues will not have their way. again, I find it really hard to believe that the West they suddenly care so much about Muslims. They don't give a crap about Muslims. Don't you understand? This is about carving up China. It's the same old divide and conquer. They try to talk about what China is doing in Tibet, right? And they didn't care at all, right? You have people from Tibet in the offices in the U.S. Congress trying to get support 40 years ago. They wouldn't even listen to them. But now that they want to attack China, now they care. So they try to use Tibet against them. Not so much now. They try to use Xinjiang. They try to use Taiwan. They try to use Hong Kong, right? All of these areas, like they try to create trouble for China in all of these areas. Don't you see? You can see it on a map. And, Donald Trump removed the Turkestan, so TIP, Turkestan Party, which is basically a terrorist group, right? They have like 5,000 Uyghurs in Syria. What are they doing in Syria? Right? They're there to fight with ISIS and with the rest of these nutjob groups. And the United States, instead of keeping them on the on the list of terrorist groups, Donald Trump removes them. Why? Because they want to use them as a thorn in China's side. That's what it's about, right? So the Arab League has gone there and see nothing wrong, and I really find it hard to listen to Western countries speaking for Arabs and speaking for Muslims and speaking for China, like as if they even care, even if this were true, which is it's not true, right? So you don't have to listen to me. You can listen to the Arab League and what they saw. They're the ones who visited there. I think they would care more about what's happening to Muslims if this were true than someone working in the State Department. Sorry, not sorry. But yeah, this is how it goes, man. They try to create trouble for them and divide and conquer, and same thing. And remember, this is an area where China shares a border with Afghanistan, right? So, by having NATO in Afghanistan for 20 years, this is a way to kind of threaten Iran and threaten China, because now you have, as I said, a bunch of NATO bases on their border, right, in a neighboring country. And so on top of that, they try to not only scare them with the presence of NATO troops, but get into the country, set these groups loose against China, and then cook up trouble and say, oh my God, China is oppressing people here. If we're going to talk about oppressed people, why don't you stop oppressing the natives in the United States who have zero political voice? They have zero presence in any domain, economic, political. There's no native voice whatsoever. Or African Americans. Why don't you deal with the oppression of African Americans and Native Americans before you worry about Muslims in China, which is not even real, right? They exaggerate or make up these issues to act like they care. They don't care, man. They don't care one bit. So there you go. The Crazy Puppet. It's good to see you, Crazy Puppet. Crazy Puppet says, I just came for the crab dance. I'm glad to see you. Pradesh, good to see you as well. And Pradesh says, first of all, hi, Richard. Hope you're doing well. Thank you. You likewise. But the West always tries this weird cultural hijacking, like that crappy Cleopatra film from Netflix. Why did you tell me about this? Now I have to go watch it and suffer through it. I'm not familiar with it. I'll oh, hold on. Isn't it that Israeli actress? There's some Israeli actress, and they cast her as Cleopatra. Yeah, because Cleopatra was from Europe. Oh God, I am not watching that whatsoever. No, if you guys want to watch something on Netflix, watch Farha, right? No, hold on, was it Farah or Farha? I forgot the movie's name. Hold on. I even made a thing about it. Yeah, it was Farha. It was. So go watch it, because that is. They were so upset about it because it's one of the only films in the West, or let's say on Netflix at least, it's accessible to Western audiences that shows you, what the Israelis did and how it was like in the Nakba. So you should watch it. You should definitely watch it. Again, guys, thank you so much for supporting the show. I've been blabbing for a couple of hours, for almost 4 hours. If you would kindly support my work, I'd be very grateful. You can donate on PayPal. And you can also be a monthly supporter. You can join as a monthly supporter on Patreon and on YouTube. And on YouTube, you get these cool emojis. So I see we've got 0 new members. At least one of you should join on YouTube. Okay? Join as a member and you will get these funny emojis that Sophia has next to her face. And Sophia says she watched the movie. I'm good. More people should watch it. So as soon as we get a new member on YouTube or on Patreon, I will play a crab dance for you guys. And very sad, just going back to Daniel Ellsberg, very sad to hear about him passing away. This is, his dying words. Well, not his dying words, but definitely things that he said many times. He said that he encourages more people to leak and not wait like him, because he regrets having waited so long to leak those documents, which showed what the US was doing in Vietnam. So, yeah. Gamer for Life says, I wish all the best to Claudia and I hope she recovers and feels better. Likewise. We don't have Claudia present today, but she's gonna get well. She's gonna be with us soon, and I hope she gets well as well. And Joseph also is yelling, "Get well, Claudia." NG says, "How do you spell that movie Richard mentioned?" I'll spell it for you. It's Farha. That's it. Farha. It's 5 letters. Wait, let me tag you so you see it. I don't know if there you go. Okay, you're welcome. Give me a second. By the way, you guys know I'm live on Rumble. So I've tried going, I think we're live on Rumble, Rockfin, and also YouTube at the same time. And Odyssey I'll fix next time. It's just when I'm preparing all these things, I'm very focused on what I'm gonna say, and then at the last minute, I don't want to deal with other things. In any case, I hope you guys support the show, and please make sure you share the videos. I guess we won't be getting that crab dance just yet. I don't see any new members, but I appreciate your support, and I'll see you guys next time. Again, take care. Ma salame. Thank you very much.
Sweden wanted to join NATO. They broke with their decades-long neutral stance. Turkey was one of the only countries, I think along with Hungary, that was saying, we're not going to let you in, because you need to have consensus, right? You need all the members in NATO to say, okay, you can join. Their bid has kind of been in limbo because Turkey wanted to, extract several concessions. It was very clear that they really want to join NATO in Sweden, and they were doing everything they could to appease the Turks. And then this moron comes in front of the Turkish embassy and burns the Quran. I understand that in their point of view, this is freedom of expression, and you're in Sweden, you can do whatever you like. But you have to remember that if you're trying to get Turkey support, maybe wait until after you've gotten it. I mean, this is just dumb from a diplomatic level. They're doing everything to appease Turkey, and then because of one idiot, they let this go to waste. The Germans and the Americans have decided that it would be a good idea to send Ukraine tanks. German tanks against the Russian. Man, I'm perplexed by this. What do they think is going to happen? Because even if you can train the Ukrainian crews who are used to Soviet tanks to operate British tanks, and then you got to train them to operate German tanks, and then you got to train them to operate American tanks, and that's if they can even maintain the logistical supply line to work with these tanks, to keep them running. What kind of door are you opening now for the Russians to do? I mean, this is very clearly escalation. While Germany and the US are saying, yeah, we're going to give Ukraine tanks, the doomsday clock has been moved to 90 seconds to midnight. So this is basically, it's a measurement of how close we are to the end of the world, to the apocalypse, to annihilating the planet with nuclear weapons, right? And this is the closest it's ever been to midnight, okay? Midnight representing the end. Ukraine's most senior military commander has said that his forces need about 300 Western tanks. Over the last year, NATO allies in Eastern Europe supplied Ukraine with Soviet-era and Russian-made tanks that have been ground down or destroyed in constant fighting. Soviet-era and Russian-made tanks. Now, Ukraine, having been a Soviet satellite state and part of the Soviet Union, it was part of Russia, you know, all of its military personnel being trained on Russian tanks. What do you think they're going to do with American tanks or German tanks, which they are not trained to operate? The Ukrainians know how to operate Russian tanks. That's all they know how to operate. The Ukrainians only use Soviet stuff, right? Until the last couple of years and until now. You know, this is the first major influx of NATO weapons. And again, NATO has been training Ukrainian forces, but Challenger tanks, this is brand new. If they can't even use the tanks that they're trained to use, what makes you so confident they're going to know how to use a Leopard 2 or an M1A2 or a Challenger 2? Man, people